Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last day of a National Internal Audit Conference. Before we start, requesting the ICAI staff to play ICAI motto and requesting all of you to please keep your hand on your heart.
Yaesha supteshu jagrati Yaesha supteshu jagrati Kamam 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 Pursho nirmimanaha Tadeva shukrada brahma Tadeva amritamucchate Tasmin lokaha shataha Sarve taduna kaschan Etadvaita
Faculty of the session, CA Milan Mody, CA Hitesh Pomal, the regional council member of ICAI, my council colleague, and all the participants, plus the coordinator of the session, CA Parag Bhatt. Good evening, all of you, to the last day of a National Internal Audit Conference. It has been a tremendous response which I have received for the last 3 days, and I'm sure that this is going to happen even for today. Today we are having the eminent faculty, and one of the most important things, the topic itself is very critical. We have learned many things about the internal audit program, internal control, risk management, audit fieldwork. How everything remains unfinished till the time we issue audit report. There's always a huge difference between the audit report issued by certain large size firm compared to SMC like us. And what matters, even though you have spent days and days together, nights and nights together, but still the work may not be acknowledged by the board if it is not in the format which is required. I think we need to really also focus, primarily we should focus also on reporting. We have been very good in executions. We understand that how to identify the issues or risk, but when we to present in the reports, somehow we are lagging behind. And that's why we are having today with us CA Milan Mody, who has dealt with this topic very earlier also, and is the expert on this topic. I'm sure that with his wisdom, we all are going to get a lot of knowledge. Before I hand over charge to Milan, I request my council colleague Hitesh Pomal to introduce our faculty.
Thank you very much, Chintan bhai, and very good evening to all. And this is being the one of the very first ever national conference on internal audit hosted by the Ahmedabad branch, and I welcome on behalf of Ahmedabad branch, I welcome all the participants. And so far as the introduction of CA Milan Mody sir is concerned, CA Milan Mody sir is the has got the all India rank in inter as well as the final examination also, that is on 38th and 36th rank respectively in the May 1997 batch. He is in the audit practice since more than 24 years, and he is the partner audit and insurance at the NSI and Associate LLP. Sir has made around nearly 40 presentations at various forums or the platforms, namely with the BCAS, WRC and its branches, Chamber of Tax Consultants, and various other CPE study circles also. He has made the presentation on the topics, and that are most relevant, as rightly said by Chintan bhai, related to audit, including internal audit, auditing and assurance standard, Companies Act 2013, Ind AS, due diligence and corporate social responsibility. Sir is the technical reviewer of the annual reports for ICAI awards on excellence in financial reporting for 4 consecutive years from 1516 to 1920. Milan bhai has authored various articles published in the newspapers, online portals and professional journals published by BCAS, CTC and ICAI on various technical topics, majority of which are pertaining to the audit and the auditors. Milan Bhai has held the committee. He was the committee member. He has held the committee member positions at BCS, WRC, and CTC, and is presently a member of Accounting and Auditing Committee at Chamber of Tax Consultant. With these brief introduction, and today sir will be share his expert knowledge on the audit findings, that is follow-up and validation and resolution. With these brief introduction, I invite sir to deliberate on the subject and throw the light on the subject.
Before Milan Bhai,
Yes,
before Milan Bhai just take the charge, thank you so much Hitesh Bhai for sparing your time, because obviously coming along with and then sparing time is really very important. So thank you for basically. And before Milan Bhai take charge, I just would like to mention that after this particular session is over, second sessions is primarily focusing on a panel discussion, and we have a very high power panelist, which includes the past president of ICAI, CA Nilesh Vikamsey, Rakesh Agarwal, CA, who is the head of CFO in RIL Reliance Industries, and from Wipro there is Sandhya Sriram, and all these panel is going to be moderated by CA Shailesh Haribhakti. So I think then they are going to discuss very critical issues of shareholders reporting and auditing presentations. So now hand over charge to Milan Bhai.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chintan and Hitesh Bhai. Thank you everyone for giving this opportunity. Yeah, audit has been my passion and love, and hence what I will try to do is try to speak from my heart, try to speak from my experience, try to share as much as I can, because otherwise there is a lot of literature which is available at in the public domain. There are a lot of videos which will be available. So there is no dearth of knowledge in this digital age. But you need somebody who can guide you in terms of saying that you should look at it from this perspective, or it has to stimulate the brain, and the interaction is what really helps achieve that. Otherwise, these are very generalistic topic. There is no standard pattern or standard yes or no. There is no technical law which says that this is the way it should be done. There are obviously internal audit standards. We will speak about that. But it's a topic which is more commonsensical in nature, I would say. And I will come to that again a little later. Thank you, everyone. And I'll start the presentation now. So if you see the topic which has been given, it's a big topic. The topic is very large. You're talking about a wrap-up activities to completion of an audit, preparing an audit report, then the audit findings, then the follow-up, then the validation and the resolution. So this is the second half of the audit work, where the first work would be or maybe the third half of the audit work. First would be your planning stage, second would be your field work, and the third would be your wrap-up activities, completing the audit and ensuring that you deliver what you had promised. So what is important over here? What is very important is that you are clear in terms of what is your end deliverable. Are you clear what you are going to give at the end? From day one, there should be a visualization in your eyes that how will the final report look like. It's like looking at the end in the beginning, what Stephen Covey said. And that is where it is very important that if you have a visualization of how things are going to look like in the end, then your action or your execution and your planning will also be in line with what you had visualized. So it's very important that we all look at this in that perspective. So what am I going to cover today? Wrap-up activities. This is a topic which is quite unique in nature in terms of, I don't think there are many presentations which have been made in respect of wrap-up activities. So when I started thinking about it, I realized that there are few items which are important to note down when you are doing a wrap-up activity. Internal audit report, as I said, you will find a lot of literature which is there, but I have tried to look at some of it and share some of the practical examples. There are pitfalls which lead to a poor internal audit report or an ineffective internal audit report. We will try to see how to avoid them. And then there are effective report writing. I will take questions at the end, or if there is anything which people want to ask in between, subject to the organizers, they are glad to ask. When you are completing the assignment, one thing which you have to bear in mind is that you had a scope of work which was documented. There is an engagement letter. You were expected to deliver something. When you did your marketing pitch to the client, you told them that this is what you will achieve or this is what you would get. You need to ensure that that is available in the final product. So your wrap-up activity has to ensure that everything which you said would get covered, it has been covered. I'll give you an example. At times, somebody says that we want a 25% sample size. So you will have to ensure that your sample size coverage was sufficient or not. Or they wanted you to look at an additional area in terms of reference check for a new employee which has joined. You have to see that, did you actually check those things or not? If it is not checked, then you have not completed the scope of work. Please go back to the drawing board, complete that audit field work and come back. Second important thing, your working paper file, including checklist. If you are using an, there are ICQs which people use, control questionnaires. There are other checklists which people may have developed specifically for client. There are, let's say, compliance checklists which you may have used. So if you're doing an NBFC audit and you have an RBI master circular compliance checklist, look at it whether you have really covered that items which are there in that checklist or not. Ensure that your working papers are in place. Today, the working papers have been replaced from physical to digital, but still they are working papers. List out what is the pending information which you have not received from the client. Now, this is something which is important, because if you have not received that information, that means that much area you have not been able to cover, which means it's your scope limitation. So be clear, why is that information not provided? You need to probe a little bit more. Is it that it's not readily available and hence not provided? Is it that they do not want to share that information with you for any other reason? So pending information is something which you should look at from a critical perspective to see that, is there anything which they are trying to hide because of which that information is not provided? The seniors review. Now, this has to be an ongoing process, because internal audit is not a checkbox item in that sense. So a lot of deliberation, a lot of brainstorming really helps in achieving your end objective or your end result or your end product. And hence your seniors review has to be an ongoing process, but obviously it has to also ensure at the end. The seniors review is like a quality check. We will come back to that point once more. If you have collected any original agreements or original documents while doing the audit, please hand it over. You do not want your team to lose that original document and then you being blamed for internal audit as an internal auditor that you misplaced some of the original documents of the company. These are very simple things, but still what I would suggest is keep a tab of all these things, train your team in the same area so that your team also has the habit of following these steps. Draft queries have to be shared with the process owner. None of the process owners like to be in surprise. If there is a comment about their activity, they would like to hear that. Hear from them, try to take their inputs. There may be some clarification because of which the query may no longer remain a query and it may not convert into an observation. What is an observation? Observation is a conversion of a query into an observation. There is a journey in that. So there are a lot of times you may have a query. Oh, this has not been approved by so-and-so gentleman. Now there could be a rationale which that person may provide or may provide that confirmation by any other mechanism, in which case you may have to modify your observation or drop your observation. This is something important. Again, IIA's framework as well as SIA framework talk about this. Exit meeting with the process owner. Try to share what your findings are, one at a macro level and one at a micro level. When I say macro level and a micro level, if you are doing, let's say, procurement, then you have to first look at procurement in totality and then break it up into several points on procurement. So whether you are saying overall procurement, the controls are adequate, not adequate, whether they are moderate, whether there is a need for improvement. Once you have made that statement or that assessment that the control are adequate, not adequate, we will come to that. How do you do that rating of whether adequate, not adequate, or strong controls? Then you go to the micro points. Purchase orders not approved, gap between purchase requisition date and the purchase order date. The purchase which is accounted is different than the purchase order raised, open purchase orders. So all those points are other points, but the first comes a macro perspective. A lot of people deliberate that should you go to from micro to macro or should you go from a macro to micro? My view is that you should first give an overall assessment and then follow it up with your actual instances. I already spoke about additional rework if the senior feels that, I'll tell you an example that we were doing a payroll audit, and in the payroll audit, suddenly we felt that let's look at the attrition rate of the company for the last 5 years. Let's do that analysis and see whether there is anything out of it. And we realized that there is a lot of attrition. And then when we asked for exit interview of the employees who have left, and we said, let's look at the common causes which are there why people are leaving. And that was useful information which we gave to the company while we were presenting our internal audit. It's not necessarily an observation, it's a perspective, because that information was already available with the HR department. Now, whether they thought about this to present to the management or not is a separate point. Obtain buy-in for the process owners for solutions which you are providing. So if you are providing a solution of automation, if you are providing a solution that SAP should be used instead of a Excel worksheet, if you are providing a solution that, this particular activity should be done in this particular manner, ensure that the process owner is also in the same line. This is very important. So sell your solution, sell your recommendation, sell your suggestion to the process owner. It will make your life easier at the later stage. The next point is something which we always miss out. As accountants, we always like to argue, and then that argument we actually lose out. We always want to prove our point. But if there are good points which are there, which have been implemented by the company, either based on past report or otherwise, please highlight that. Because you should always start with something which is good and then start about areas where there is an improvement. See, improvement is a never-ending process. So even if they have improved, you will still have another 2 points for improvement. So give them the credit for what they have already achieved. Link various observations to see the macro issue, which we spoke about. Let's say you have found that there are various issues. I'll give you an example. Consumption entries, there were delay. When we went to consumption entries, why there is a delay? We found out because the GRN was not prepared. Now, why was GRN not prepared? GRN was not prepared because purchase order was not prepared. Now, if you see, or there was a delay in preparing purchase order. So a procurement item led to a production entries not being passed or not being posted. So you will have to look at the implication overall and then communicate your findings to the process owner. This is still not at the report writing stage, but these are also points which will be relevant at that point of time. Based on the inputs which you receive, you may have to modify your observations slightly. So take care of that. So this is a typical wrap-up activities. There are 2 more slides on the wrap-up, and if then there is any questions on wrap-up, if you all allow, then we can take those questions. Very important is not to go wrong. There is this, I had one client who would always take my annexure and start poking holes in those annexures. And it was very embarrassing because he would say, you have made these cases, there is no approval, but actually there was an approval. You did not see it properly. So validate your audit findings, ensure that they are reliable, ensure that there is a consistency in your approach when you're giving a rating or when you are looking at that observation. The documents which you have gathered, you may have to scan those documents, keep it as a part of an annexure so that that question does not arise during the meeting. Because this is very common where the auditor says something and there is a counter statement by the process owner. To avoid that, if you have your documentation in place, if you have your evidence in place, you will be able to show them and it would set the item at rest at that point of time. There is SIA 320 and 330, which is on audit evidence and audit documentation. Please ensure that you have fulfilled that. There is also a requirement that there is an FAQ on UDIN, which says that each internal audit report also should have an UDI. And over the last 5-6 years, there has been a practice where everybody is asking for a signed copy of the internal audit report also. what will make it effective, the overall process or the closure or the overall internal audit activity, I think is doing an introspection, doing supervision, looking at the suggestions to improve the point, visualize what will the client think about this observation. Will they think it is practical? Will they think it is an impractical solution? How will the reaction be? If you say that there has been a delay in statutory dues, and the delay was, let's say, because of the website not working of the government department. Now, if you have not brought out that point clearly, then you are not giving a fair chance to the audience to understand that the rationale was that the website was down. So try to visualize what will be the response from the auditee. Check for value additions. If there are important points which require immediate attention, issue a flash report. I would say that internal audit is an investment by the client into you, and you should be able to churn out, or you should be able to give back tangible and intangible benefits which are at least equivalent to the audit fees, if not more. Obviously, some people claim that they will do it much more, but what I'm saying is whatever your suggestions are, whatever your value additions are, they should be greater than the return on investment is there for the client to see, and it will make your next assignment or your next renewal that much more easier. A lot of times what I have seen is that when we do an audit, we come across areas which are weak, and then you can suggest that this should be further looked at. So we have suggested that you should do a detailed audit of GST. We have suggested you should do an IS audit because there are a lot of passport related issues. So try to look at the audit scope which has been given. But if you feel that there is something which will benefit the client by covering something more in future, try to highlight that issue. So whether it is IS audit, GS audit, GST audit, preparation of standard operating procedures, whatever those cases may be. Yeah, so this was up to the wrap-up activities and the, what we call as the care which should be taken at that stage. If there is anything or if there is any change in the flow which you require, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll continue.
All okay, Milan, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I don't need to explain what is an internal audit report. Internal audit report is whatever is your finding that is to be there on the paper. It has to come out on the, for the purpose of sharing. It's a communication. Here, what we are talking about is a written internal audit report. We are not talking about verbal conversation. It is a clear written expression of significant observations and recommendations based on review of policies, process, risk controls, and transactions. The findings and recommendations are designed so that the organization which was the auditee can work on it, take action on it, and be closer to its objective, be closer to in terms of its laid down policies, procedures, etc. To put it slightly differently, it highlights the effectiveness of governance, risk management, and control. So are they effective? Are controls effective? Is the risk management properly managed? Is the governance is in place or not? It also allows the management to look at what are the issues which are there and take corrective action. If there are no issues, then also it is called as assurance service, which means everything is okay. That itself is an assurance to the management. Okay, you have sufficient controls. At the most, if you have controls which are beyond requirement, you may want to dilute those controls because every control has a cost element to it. So if there is over control, you may want to also suggest sometimes reduction of certain processes or multiple levels of checking. So for that, you really need to go into the details and then suggest that. The audit report helps to demonstrate that this is what was planned. This was the audit objective. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to check, let's say, bill passing. In bill passing, what is it that I wanted to check? I wanted to check vendor registration. I wanted to check whether the KYC of the vendors is correct or not. Whether bank account of the vendors, what are the controls associated with that? Because now there is a direct online payment. And so whether you are taking cancelled check or not, who has the authority to make amendments to the bank account, because you will see that there were a lot of frauds which have surfaced where emails have gone from Gmail account from a similar Gmail account or other accounts to the company saying that my bank account has undergone a change and please change this account, whereas actually those were fraud cases. So what are the procedure for changes in bank account, and who are authorized to do it, and what are the evidences which the company keeps in its custody while changing the bank account of the vendor? So you'll have to demonstrate that you went through the complete process, end-to-end process, and these were the areas where you found gaps. It is an ability. So if I'm an internal auditor, how does anybody know that I'm a good internal auditor, or I'm a reliable internal auditor, or I'm an internal auditor who will be able to add value? The report actually is a reflection of what I am, because I may not be able to speak everything, but the report is there which has to demonstrate the capability which the firm has, the work which it has done, and the outcome. So it is a brand ambassador for the firm also in that sense. Provide sound basis for any assurance given by the internal auditor. This is what I spoke about, that if you are satisfied that the processes are sufficient and adequate, or controls are sufficient and adequate, what is the basis on which you are relying on that? What was, we'll come to what should be covered for that purposes. A slightly different topic, then there are two types of assurances. One is where you are giving a reasonable assurance or a limited assurance, and other internal audit assignments. So your IFC, when as a statutory auditor, you are looking at IFC controls and you are saying that the IFC framework design and the testing was adequate, that is like a reasonable or a limited assurance, which you are opining on. Whereas in most of the other internal audit assignments, though you are giving an assessment of effectiveness, in that sense, it's not an opinion which you are giving. It is your assessment based on the various things which you have checked or the sample which you have verified, and that is what is important. The standard SIA 110, it says that if initially it was an assurance assignment and then you have changed it, then that has to be properly documented along with reasons. So this is something which is just to keep at the back of mind, that there are certain assignments where you will have to be, your evidence, your collection, and your drafting will have to be in sync with what is the standard SIA 110. I would say that in all cases, consider it as like a similar to an attestation function rather than keeping it too much open. Because if you strive towards that, then the quality of your, checking, the quality of the stress which you give on the points would be that much more important. These are the different types of internal audit reports: flash report, interim report, detailed report, and executive summary. This is just, I think most of you all are already aware about it, so nothing to speak about. As I said, there are standards. Why are these standards? These standards are to improve the quality, elevate the quality, ensure consistency, and to bring internal audit profession to the next level. And the institute has also issued standards, whereas the Institute of Internal Auditor, which is, the website is thgiia.org, which is the apex body in that sense, or the US-based body, which is considered as one of the most relevant when it comes to internal audit. And they have standards on reporting to senior management, communication, criteria for communication, quality of communication, results, how you will disseminate, the opinion, monitoring progress, and communication and acceptance of risk. This last one is something which I will just speak about. So let's say you identified a particular risk and the management believes that no, they do not want to address that risk. They want to live with that risk because it's costlier to implement it. I'll give you an example. I was doing a hotel audit, and one of the hotel requirement is that there should be an X-ray scanner outside the before entry. Now, unfortunately, this hotel had no space outside, and the lobby, obviously, you cannot keep. They were not able to keep it in the lobby, and they consciously took a view that they will do a physical checking instead of an X-ray, which may not be sufficient. But they said, okay, we want to live with that risk. and we will see what happens. So in which case then as an internal auditor, you are taking it in writing that they do not want to address this compliance issue or this requirement which is there under the law, and they want to live with that problem. Again, don't take this example from that perspective because this was a statutory item. So what should be the form of the internal audit report? I mean, there is no right or a wrong answer here. But yes, there are good reports and there are bad reports, or there are not so effective reports, if I would put it. SIA does not specify any standard report, but the IIA practice advisory does give an illustration of how the internal audit report should look like, including the observations. So we will see that at the end of the slides. What is used earlier, Word was used, in between Excel was used because Excel had some features which are like tracking and various columns, which was easier. Tables in Word were becoming that much difficult to manage, and hence Excel was used. The present trend is more of on the PowerPoint, where it is like an executive summary, but it is a full report. Yeah. So what was earlier considered only useful for a executive summary now has got replaced for the actual report. The report format also depends on client expectation and requirement. I'll tell you, but there was one client who wanted us to give it in Excel only. He said, you don't give it to me in any other form, you give it to me in Excel. And he wanted in particular columns only. So there are clients who want to say that they want to do it in a particular manner. Most of the banks also have a prescribed format for, so most of these banks have an internal audit cell, but they outsource some of the work or co-source some of the internal audit work to the CA firms, and where they have a strict format in terms of what should be provided by the internal auditor. The format, whatever you use, try to use it consistently and properly, because if you are comfortable with it, the client will also start becoming comfortable with that format. I will not highlight this further. The Excel, as I mentioned, is also used for action plans and a tracker for all previous issues. And that is something which cannot be done through PowerPoint or Word as effectively as it can be done in Excel. So keep that in mind, that if it's an action plan or it is a previous observations, you may have to, if you initially prepared it in PowerPoint, you may still have to convert it into an Excel file for the purpose of monitoring and tracking. Word is easier than PowerPoint report, but at least at the senior level, the Word report have now almost phased out. Maybe 10 years back, Word was a very, very preferred method. It is easy to type, and corrections and changes and all that is much easier than PowerPoint. And we will see why PowerPoint is more powerful for the report writing, because there is a feature in PowerPoint called Smart Art, and the Smart Art is a pictorial depiction of in lot of manner, and that pictorial depiction is what will help people register your observation more easily. I was asked to give a template. This is actually a template, but I will cover another template also later on, and there are piecemeal templates which are covered throughout the session. Title and address and report distribution list. So company name, obviously, what is the period of coverage, whom is it to be distributed to, what was the sample size, what is the area which was under audit, the executive summary, then the detailed observations section, overall assessment which will come in between, comment from the management, action taken report, date of the report, place and sign and signature with membership number, and restriction on report circulation. So these are the various elements which should be covered. Sorry, there is one thing which is missing here, which I spoke about, the overall assessment. It is covered subsequently, but in this slide it is missing. So look at each report should cover minimum these items. Yeah, and these are not very difficult. Scope and objective will come from your engagement. Your sampling will come from your actual work. Executive summary is nothing but a brief of what is reported in your detailed report. Comment from management is something which is very important. I'll just share here a difficult client. When you used to ask him for a comment, he used to give long stories and justification of why things have gone wrong. So then at one point of time, it was becoming very difficult to manage, to and fro. He would comment, sir, you have not looked at this. You have not understood why this has happened in this manner. So at that point of time, what I realized is that there's no point in arguing with this guy. First, let's ask him, do you agree with the observation in principle or not? Do you agree with the recommendation which I am giving in principle or not? Say yes and no, and then give your explanation. So then the response was in two buckets. First, do you agree? Yes, no. Because I don't want to get into a justification mode while I'm talking about the report. Justification is important. You need to have empathy. You need to put yourself in the shoes of the client. But in this particular case, this was the approach which we had to adopt because it was otherwise becoming difficult to close a particular point. So this is the same thing in a slightly different manner. Your objective, scope, and approach of the assignment. Recognition of positive aspects noted during the review. Overall analysis or conclusion which you have drawn. So you may have drawn a conclusion that there is the controls are weak, for example. Then this overall conclusion will have to say that the controls are weak, and you will also have to say why you feel that way. And then obviously the subsequent slides will have to explain that in detail. The fourth bucket is your observation, root cause, and recommendation. Now, a lot of intern auditor do vouching and they forget about root cause. If you forget about root cause, that's not something which is to be done. You have to find out why this happened. Once you know why it has happened, then only you can suggest something so that it cannot reoccur. So it is very important that you go to the root cause and accordingly modify your recommendation. Prior period issues and action taken report. This is another area which has been generally weak, where, you know, once we have suggested something or observed something, then we forget about it. No, you have to monitor whether it is implemented or not. There are two reasons why you should monitor. First, to know whether the client really benefited from your observation, your finding, and your solution. If the client has benefited and it is implemented, that's a satisfaction which you get as an intern auditor, that your work was recognized and it was implemented. And if it was not, then you have to introspect that why is it that the client, in spite of the fact that you believe that this is something which should be implemented, why is the client not ready to implement it? So from both the perspectives, it is important that you track your earlier observations. Executive summary. I think the next session is on that, where presentation to the audit committee, and there are luminaries which are there who are going to make that presentation. No specific format has been prescribed either by IIA or the SIA. Some of these are very, very standard, but because I had to cover everything, I have put it: background of the company, the process which you are doing the audit on. Those things should be covered in your opening and the introduction paragraph. If there is an area, there is a statement of responsibility of entities management and responsibility of intern auditor. This is something like similar to what we have in statutory audit. You will have to reproduce that also in your opening and introductory paragraph, depending again on the scope and which has been provided to you. The scope paragraph should include minimum these items, which is reference to audit procedures, which you are adopted, the background and methodology of intern audit, what was the sample size which you chose, and if there is any limitation. So this is something which can help you if you have selected 10% sample size, 20% sample size, and if you have found deviation of certain percentage. These all things will be useful to you in the subsequent part of the report. So ensure that the scope paragraph covers what was there in the engagement, and it gives in description of the methodology. So for example, if you have done physical verification, say that you did physical verification of the inventory. If you have not done physical verification, you need to mention that also. Or for example, if you have done, when it comes to price discovery, if you have done an independent verification from some of these sources, you may have to say that your scope covered independent verification. There is a concept called as mystery audit. Mystery audit is where you, as an auditor, basically it is for retail organizations. You go to that retail organization as if you are a customer, and you make your notings, your observation, whether you as a customer, what was the experience. So for example, if somebody is doing Starbucks audit, the audit team member will go there as a customer and try to understand whether the store related SOPs were followed or not. Was the person asked whether you need tap water or a Bisleri water, whatever those SOPs are. So those will be validated by that mystery audit. So these all things should be covered in your scope paragraph. For example, one of the things today is that due to COVID, you have not maybe visited the factory, or you have done most of the audit work sitting from home or from your office. So that also is something which you will have to consider whether you need to include it or not. It will depend on each area and scope. What is exactly an observation? And I said that there is a journey from a query to an observation. Observation, and you need to answer this. What is wrong? What is the actual observation? What is the deviation? Why do you think this is important? Why did it go wrong? How do you think it can be corrected? And what will be done in future about it? So what's the way forward? So which will include what are the action plans, what are the target dates, and who are the persons who are responsible to correct that observation. And we will come further on what is an observation per se. So what is an observation? Okay. So there is a criteria which is your standard measure or expectation used in making an evaluation. So when you find something that this was not done in adherence to the standard operating procedure. So the criteria is the standard operating procedure, and the condition is that what you found that it was not adhered to, it was not followed. So for example, if there was a credit limit and if there is a credit exposure beyond that credit limit, then it requires an approval of the senior. And if you found that that senior's approval was not there, then you are saying that SOP was not complied with, or laid down policy and procedure was not complied with. So you have to understand what is an observation. The observation is that this is the due date by which TDS has to be paid. And you found that the TDS was paid subsequently. So that's the criteria was the law, that was the standard. And what you have found is that there was a delay beyond that. So there would be whatever examples which you find generally will fall under that as observation. What was the cause of that observation? So if they did not adhere to the standard operating procedure, was it an oversight? Was it not general careless approach? Was it because the software did not support it? Was it due to paucity of time? Was it due to paucity of manpower? Try to find out the reason why it happened. Yeah, it's very important. A lot of times we say that the operating software and the accounting software, the revenue do not match. Okay, it does not match. You have given the difference, but why does it match? Do you know the reason? The reason is obviously that there is no integration or a bridge between the two softwares. But what further? Can you give little more insight so that the resolution becomes that much more easier? Recommendation becomes more powerful. So try to look at the cause why something happened. This is something which is very important. If you are able to understand the cause, you will be able to add a lot of value to the client. Effect is the difference between the condition and criteria. Now, effect is into two parts. One is a real effect and one is a potential effect. So let's say we found in one particular case that there was a 10,000 limit for purchase orders, and the person used to prepare two purchase orders of 9,000 each. Yeah, instead of 10,000, he will purchase two purchase orders of 9,000 each. So he will circumvent this system where he does not have to go to his senior for approval. Now, what is the effect of that? The effect of that is that you're giving preference to a particular vendor, or you are taking away the authority of the senior to make his valuable, involvement and relevant comment while that purchase order comes to that person. There is a reason that purchase order beyond 10,000 would have come to that senior. That is getting vitiated. So try to find out the effect. Let's take another example. Due to COVID, a lot of factories were closed and the inventory started piling up. Now, at that point of time, did everybody take additional insurance for stock? Maybe no. Another issue which we find is that fixed assets policy is taken and there is no variation clause, and then you bought another machinery. And when you bought that another machinery, at that point of time, you did not take insurance. Okay, so both these examples where the insurance value has shot up or the inventory value has shot up in excess of the insurance coverage, or you have added something and you have not taken insurance. It could be asset, it could be a new job worker, whatever it is. Try to find out what was the reason why this happened. The reason it happened is either they did not have a mechanism, which is an alarm system or an early warning system that this should be done. Like in case of vehicle, it never happens because you don't get the vehicle unless the insurance is there. Yeah. So similarly, then you have to build in a control where fixed assets cannot get capitalized unless it is insured. So where was that pop-up or where was that reminder kept in SAP so that, or while creating the fixed assets card, so that this can be mitigated? The effect is that you did not take insurance. So potential effect is that had there been a fire and that machinery or that inventory would have got damaged, you would not have got the money. So that's a potential effect. Real effect is at this point of time, no financial impact. It's just that your assets are underinsured. Recommendation should include the actions that must be taken to correct that cause. Again, the same thing, but in a different manner. So all the observations should be backed by adequate facts. Accuracy cannot be compromised. You cannot have the client doing audit of your work and saying that, no, this is not a correct information or these facts are not correct. So ensure that you have the correct facts. If there is a checking required at that, if there is a maker checker required at your end, which means the team who is doing it and the senior who is reviewing it, that needs to be established. Each observation should be listed in the order of significance. Now, this is something which is very important, that you cannot start with an observation which has less relevance, because then people will lose interest in going further into it. So how do you know the relevance of a particular observation? It is based on risk and impact, which we will see in the subsequent slide. Observations can be drafted in two manners, which is forward-looking in terms of improvement and enhancement of control, or it is in a negative manner, which focuses towards weakness. Depending on the type of assignment and the type of observation, you will have to choose a style which is suited for that assignment. The draft observations should be shared with the process owner so that you have an opportunity to rectify any misunderstanding, disagreement, or if there is any clarification which changes the way in which you are looking at it. The root cause, real immediate effect, and potential effect both should be covered in your internal audit presentation report. I'm not sure how many of us as internal auditor first look at each observation and really say that how critical it is. Sometimes we have this habit of, because we are so attached to that observation because we have found it, we sometimes tend to give a higher rating. So try to see that your rating is fair. There is a mechanism you can use, scorecards for the purpose of rating. So for example, what we did in one particular case, that if out of, the way you do materiality, we did a materiality that I checked 100 samples. Anything beyond 2 deviations, I will say it is moderate. Anything beyond 5 deviations, I would say it is high critical, because then there is the chances of that happening are greater. And then obviously you have to look at the impact side of it. This was the level of occurrence of that area. So again, let's say there was an excess payment or there was a duplicate payment. Now you found 1 instances. Then you will either extend your checking and see why did that excess payment or duplicate payment happen. So what happened in COVID? First, the client gave the bill in the email, and that time the payment happened because he was following up. And then subsequently the same bill came by courier and you not realizing you made that payment again. So there was a change in your standard operating procedure due to COVID, but you did not have an alternative control mechanism. The moment you did not have an alternative control mechanism, this happened. Now, if you find that there are more than 2-3 instances, then you would give a high rating, because this is something which could lead to high losses to the company. So depending on the sample size and the deviations which you have observed, you may have to give high, medium, and low. Another thing which is generally done is when it comes to statutory liability, it is either high or medium. It is not given low, because statutory compliance is something which all independent directors or all directors per se are concerned about, that they are in a fiduciary capacity and they do not want to get notices at their doorstep with respect to non-compliance which the company has done. The basis in which you determine your criticality should be communicated in advance. If you are using a subjective parameter, if you're using, so let's say if procurement is an area and you had 6 different observations on procurement, but procurement per se is an area, there is no that rating is based on some assessment, right, or a judgment, or it could be coming out of those 6, 7, 10 processes which were there. So in which case, document how you have done it. Use color codes. So if you see here, it is high, medium, low. Another thing which you should very clearly use is that, is this a new observation or is this a recurring observation? So is it a carry forward observation or is it a new observation? This is something very relevant. So let's say IOUs were not cleared for a long period of time. And this time also you found it, that time also you found it. The instances were different, but it is still a carry forward point because as a process, it has not got resolved. So it's not necessary that the same instance should be there. It is the nature of observation. If it is repeated, it will become a carry forward point. This is something which all of us need to be aware about, which is that if there is anything which goes wrong, what is the probability of that occurrence and what is the impact of the item, or what is the risk which is associated. If you see, it's a 9x9 quadrant. So let's say you are in Latur and you have a factory in Latur. Now Latur is a seismic zone 4 where earthquakes are possible. It's very high intensity where earthquake is possible, and insurance is not taken for earthquake. Now that would become a high criticality. But let's say your factory is in a place where the earthquake are very rare. The seismic zone by the department is maybe 1, in which case you may want to mild down that observation to medium criticality. This is just one example, because what you are saying is probability of occurrence of an earthquake in Latur is very high, whereas it is very low or medium when it comes to any other location. So similarly, try to look at every observation from that perspective. So let's say duplicate payment you have seen, right? Now, what is a possibility that it will reoccur? You have to find out what was the reason and decide based on that what is the probability. And if it is happening, then you have to look at the risk, which means, are there multiple controls when payment is above a certain level, in which case it can again get stopped. So again, there is a probability of occurrence, but because there is a maker checker, or there is segregation of duty, or there is an additional approval mechanism, there is a possibility it may still fall under the medium category, though it is otherwise probability may be high. So this is the overall analysis which we present to our client, and let me tell you, this is exactly what we do for our clients, which I have shared over here. The first column is the area: procurement, inventory, statutory compliance, MIS, and routine areas. Routine areas will be your BRS and your bank vouching. The assessment is what I believe that there are moderate controls, either there is improvement required and there is a strong control. And the categories are high, medium, low, recommendation, information. And how many observations did I find in each of these categories of high, medium, low, recommendation, information? If you see at the end, there is equal to up arrow and down arrow. This is basically an indicator that as compared to the previous audit, was this area, is there an improvement? Is it status quo? Or whether there is a downgrading in terms of the controls. So you found more gaps this time as compared to what you found in the earlier audit. Let me tell you, this gives you a bird's eye view in terms of where you are as an organization on all these areas. And it's very important that you use your judgment properly. As I said, do not get biased by few things. Try to be fair, try to find out the root cause, and then attempt to do this, because it should not backfire. Here, say very clearly that this is based on your judgment and the observations which you have observed. I hope this is helpful, because there are different ways in which you can do this. Another way is to say risk. So whether the risk is different, or how is the risk managed. So the same concept, you can do a little more, metrics in a different way. You can the high, medium, low, rather than on the vertical, you can use it as a horizontal, you can use it as a vertical, and the areas could be other way around. Or you can give side by side one quarter versus another quarter, which is what we will see later on. So this is what we saw. On an overall basis, the number of points are reduced quarter on quarter. So what we said is that there were no high criticality items. The medium criticality were earlier maybe 11 or 12, 11 points, then it came to 10. So these are only quantitative, these are not qualitative numbers. So be careful about it. So sometimes they may be deceptive. But this is generally, if you prepare this and if you are able to share this with the management, they are able to understand that over the last 12 months, how has the organization taken the internal audit? Has it improvised based on internal audit or not? And if you see on the left-hand side top, there is a thumbs up, which is what, today's technology, today's emoji is what you need to use. And that's what we have used it over here. And this is the presentation which we have made to some of the audit committee meetings. So follow-up, validation, and resolution is something which was asked to be covered. So track issues during previous audit, assess whether the corrective action has been taken or not, report open and pending items. I'll come to that another point on the pending items or where target dates have undergone a change. Again, here also, if a particular issue is closed, try to see that the corrective action is permanent in nature and not temporary. So it's not just a patch up. If the corrective actions are not implemented due to reasons beyond management control, example, let's say lockdown or a vendor, the software vendor did not support or whatever other reason, then mention that and also suggest what is the new action plan and what is the revised target date. And this is where I was saying, one of the meetings, Nilesh bhai did mention that, if there is a revision in the target date, the reason has to be there and it has to be approved by the senior team. While tracking prior period issues, you have to ensure that the underlying condition which led to the risk still exists or not. It should not happen that that observation itself is not relevant now. Yeah. So if you have changed your business model or if you have changed the process and that is no longer relevant, then you may have to change or say that this prior period issue is no longer relevant or it has been dropped. If the issue is not addressed for a substantial period of time, take a written representation from the management. They've accepted the risk. And this is in line with SIA 390, monitoring and reporting on prior audit issues. So the paragraph references are also given as a footer below the slide. As I told you, tracking of the earlier points is something which is very relevant. You will have the report date, you will have the period, the area which was covered, the observation, recommendation, what was the initial target date, if there is a revised target date, revised target date, who was the person responsible, and the status as on current date. Now, whether you give the implementation status at the end or the beginning, again, depending on each independent director or board, they would have a separate request. So you should understand from the audit committee members that how would they prefer the sequence and do it accordingly. The note is what I have added. The target date, if it is revised, then you should capture the reason and the approval, and it should also be presented at the right forum. The executive summary is something very important. Even the top management sometimes decide to read only based on what they find in the executive summary. So the executive summary should be in such a way that they can directly go to the relevant points which they think are more relevant. So it's a pick and choose approach in that sense for them. It should be clear, concise. It should deliver the message. It should be straightforward. Do not try to be round the bush. This is what I had done in one of the earlier items. There were a lot of open items in BRS. So, okay, so there are a lot of open items in BRS. So what? So then BRS is an effective tool to ensure that there are no wrongdoings is not effectively used. So you should be able to communicate that very clearly, that if there are open items in BRS, what does it really mean? Yeah. Is it, and why did that open items remain open? It should not include any technical jargon. Again, executive summary can also be to different audiences. So look at each audience, whether it is, and we will come to that slide also later on. It is a little more than the condensed version. Though it is a concentrated outcome of the audit work, it should be very, very powerful and impactful and effective in terms of communicating the message which you want to draw. Some of the common pitfalls, again, these are partly repetition, but I will still take through some of them quickly. No clarity about what the audience requires. You are more focused on transaction rather than process. You are talking about non-approval. Okay, it's non-approval, but why? What was the process? Where did the process failure happen? The process failure happened because the password and the of SAP for the senior, he has never used that SAP. Yeah, so try to look at that part and also comment on it if it is required. What is the implication of what you have found? What is the risk which is not, it has to be correctly brought out, so otherwise that's a mistake, that you do not bring out the implication or the risk which is associated with that problem. So let's take another example, that there is SAP and there is a BOM. BOM is not revised, or nobody has reviewed the BOM, and over the period things have changed. So wastage norms have become tighter. Earlier the wastage norm was 0.5, now the wastage norm is 0.4. But the BOM was not revised. Now, if the BOM was not revised, then what you will get is, as excess shortage of inventory on physical verification, may not necessarily be excess shortage, but they are savings in wastages. So you need to understand that if you're making a particular comment, what is the implication of it on the other processes or other MIS, which the management may be reviewing for the purpose of decision making. Try to give practical solutions which are implementable wherever possible. Again, as I said, not identifying who the reader is. Do not only focus on negative aspects or mistakes. Focus on solution. Problems are there. Problems are bound to be there. You are there not only to identify the problem, handhold the client and ensure that there is a solution to that problem. Do not project the process owners as in a very, very negative tone or a negative manner. Do not blow up things out of proportion. Again, to justify your position, don't say, oh, this is something which is very relevant. So these were the things which you should take care to avoid or make effective report in that sense. As I said, these are all connected points. Drafting errors, avoid. Flow has to be correct in terms of sequence. So whether when you're talking about, let's say, revenue, within revenue, do you go by the revenue cycle process? So whether you go with the purchase order from the client, the sales order, production planning, then the dispatch, then the billing, and then the recovery. So again, ensure that that flow is maintained if it is required. In certain cases, you may say that, okay, there are only 2 critical points and I do not want to follow the flow. Do not give incomplete information. Do not skip the sample size. Do not skip the extent of or the gravity of the problem. Always quantify your observation, even if it is small. Yeah. So we say this has led to non-availing of GST input credit, but title mein hi you should give this results in non-availing of GST input credit of rupees so much. Or you are saying that the GST reversal did not happen, though payment did not happen within 180 days to the vendor. But then how much was the amount? That is important. Do not keep it silent. Do not make it as a guesswork. Do not use technical jargons. I have not used it, so I can't give you too many examples of it, but try to avoid using any technical jargons. And the last point which is there is, do not leave the report writing till the end. Start developing it as the work progresses. This will really help you. This will help you in terms of also saying that whether anything further is required, which should be there as a part of a report, but is not covered in your field work. There are different people to whom the report goes, and each of them have a different objective. Process owner would look at genuine observations which will help him improvise those processes. Head of the department will look at it from a value addition perspective, risk perspective. He will look at it from a root cause analysis perspective. So HOD, MD will look at it in a different manner. Audit committee will look at it in terms of the statutory liability. It will look at it from a risk perspective. It will look at in terms of management reaction to those audit observations and implementation perspective. The statutory auditor will look at it comprehensively and how does it affect their work. So you see there are 4 different audiences, and you need to know how to adapt to each of their requirement, either in a same product or in way of different versions of the same product. Generally, we do not get a second chance to make the first impression, and that's very rightly said. So, the moment your report is presented, your slide, your template, the way you start your conversation, that is where automatically you have made an impression, and that is very difficult to reverse. So practice yourself, plan yourself, make efforts to ensure that if you were the receiver on the other side, how would you perceive this? As I said, you generally go from macro to micro. Try to keep the initial few points which are non-debatable in nature, which are critical but non-debatable in nature. Because that's another thing, if you start with a fight in the audit committee meeting, you say something and the processor note says, no, this observation is not valid or it's not relevant, then it will spoil the whole tone of that conversation. At times you have no choice but to do it. But if possible, start with something which is little more amicable and little more acceptable to everybody. Skeleton of your report should be there with the team also. They should know what it will look like. Generally, your scope itself should say what will the report look like. Core contents are added during the execution stage, which is, I said, the findings or deviations or variance as compared to the procedures, policies, or controls which should be there. There is another example which I wanted to give maybe later on. Okay, the final edits and version for overall analysis and risk rating. So this is generally the journey from the draft query to the report. Engage with the audience, quantify the impact, make meaningful headings to your observation. So when I say meaningful, it has to be impactful. It has to understand from the title itself. It's like a newspaper, right? When you read the newspaper heading, that is where you decide that do I need to read further in that newspaper article or not. So if it is a revenue leakage, so don't just say revenue leakage. We observed revenue leakage of so much, or we observed a process gap which has led to revenue leakage of so much. So then you are covering 3 aspects. You are covering why it happened. You're covering what is the effect of it. And then you're also covering the amount of it, which is the quantification. Or you said that multiple vendors are created for, multiple codes are created for the same vendor. Now, why were multiple vendors created? Because of obviously housekeeping issue. But what can it lead to? It could lead to entries lying in 2 different accounts and you having that much more difficulty in reconciliation. So try to bring out that part in your title itself. This is very important. And I've seen that, even as when you also speak, if the headings are clear or if the titles are clear, you are able to do that much more justice. Report should be divided into sections, area wise, critically wise, category wise, or conclusion wise. So there is again no standard one fit all solution. Sometimes you may have all high category, sometimes you may have all revenue related, sometimes you may have all ERP related issues, and then you may start with ITGC, that is IT general controls, or sometimes you may have issues in terms of approvals as one of the key items, or lack of documentation could be an all pervasive thing. So nothing is documented. Everything is done, but nothing is documented. If nothing is documented, are you going to do the audit of the WhatsApp of the client? No, you cannot do an audit of the WhatsApp of the client today. So that is what has to be brought clearly in your report. Standard format to be created for common observation. So if you're doing multiple locations of the same client and there are common observations, try to club them together. These are 3 observations which were common in both the locations, and these are separate for Silvassa, these are separate for Valsad, these are separate for the other location. Grammar and punctuation, I don't need to emphasize it. It has to be, and there are softwares available. If you're not good at it, there is a software called Grammarly. You obviously it's a paid version, but if you give a Word document to them, they will come out with the grammatical errors, and that's how you can improvise. Or within a team, whoever is better, you can give that person to do the proofreading. Consistency in phrases and words. So for example, if you have used lakhs in one slide, you cannot go to crores in the second slide. So ensure if you've used maker checker at one place, then you cannot go in a different way. Okay, this should be further checked by somebody else. You're talking about maker checker as a concept. So keep that consistency in your drafting. If there is a financial impact which you have extrapolated, so you have not actually identified the financial impact, but you are saying that if I found in 1 month that so much input credit is lost, then on an annual basis, this multiplied by 12 is I have done. So if you have used any assumption for the purpose of your financial impact or savings which you are suggesting, try to mention that what is the assumption which you have used. Do not use abbreviations, or at least expand them at one slide. I've seen that a lot of people expand the abbreviation in a starting slide, but I feel that it should be as and when it comes, you should expand it. Use bullets, sidebars, and bold and italics type. That is something which is very effective. Details which are not included in the main report can be given by way of an appendix or an annexure. Use of color coding. Accepted or not accepted findings that should be segregated. Impart training to your team members so that they also learn this, and reading other internal audit reports. Again, re-emphasizing, highlight the positive points which you have observed, which is either strong control, process followed, timely corrective action taken, and the cooperation which was extended during the internal audit activity. Visual appealing is generally more powerful than words. It is said, one picture says more than 1,000 words. So use of pictures, use of flow charting is something which you can look at in your report. To give you an example, this is the one way we present it to our client. Out of the instances, 129 instances, 41 were not approved by the finance manager in SAP. So we, instead of writing all those long sentences, we gave them this pie chart, and it was very effective. So this is just a very, very simple example, but this is what you can do for many other cases also. Another example is what we saw, that instances increased in respect of KYC document not collected. So whether it was PAN number or import-export code or the GST registration certificate, what was it earlier and how much are the instances at this point of time? Another way is to, again, with the permission, take a photograph of a godown which is very ill-managed, or take a video of that location and then share it with the management. It's possible that it can be an eye-opener for some of the senior team members. Something which is very important, do not delay your report, because the value erodes over time, it gets evaporated. So timely report is something very important, so that timely action can be taken. It's like newspaper. Just to conclude, and I'll share the templates after this slide, demonstrate that you are able to add value. Do that evaluation yourself. Ensure that the quality of your report is the best of possible. Use creativity in messaging and reporting. Fulfill various stakeholders' expectation, and ensure that the client's return on investment for internal audit fee are commensurate with what they got. Yeah, this is something which is very important. I'll take the question answers. Before that, I'll just go through this 2 slides, which is like a template. This is taken from the report by the Institute of Internal Auditors, Practice Advisory, which says that what was the purpose of audit? The purpose of audit was to ensure compliance of the contractor with the Sportsplex contract terms, with a focus on payment due from the contractor to the city. So this is an international example. So that was the purpose. What was the objective? The objective was that the audit was to ensure adequate procedures and processes are in place. Whom did you acknowledge? What was your final conclusion? Overall, based on the results, you found that things are okay. We do note that but then there is an additional recommendation, which is the second line. We do note the revenue reporting process can be enhanced to improve. So you are saying overall everything is okay, but there is a possibility for an improvement. Then it gives the background of the company and the contract which you were required to audit. what were the contours of those arrangement. Then this is just one of the observation out of that report, which says reported revenue does not meet projected revenue. Rating is low. What was the observation? So observation is obviously the comparison. Recommendation. Recommendation is continue to work with the contractor to ensure that Sportsplex facility realizes maximum revenue potential. An action plan. A process is being developed to provide insight to how the contractor is being managed. A report will be created to submit the director for quarterly review, responsible personnel director and recreation. So that's the action plan which is being created, and this is the due date. So this is just one illustrative example which I felt because I was asked for a template. So this is what I have created. That's it from my side. I have kept the last 15 minutes for any questions or any other inputs which anybody may want to share. Yeah, Chintan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Milan bhai. It was really fantastic, because one of the most important thing is that your presentation itself was very good. See, whatever sometimes you have given presentations, you are talking about reporting on internal audit, and the way you presented, I think that shows that how the report should be there, how we would present, and the excellent slide. I think which I want to say is the analysis. I think you talk about one overall analysis slide, where you are covered in the table format. You are covered about the equal, increase, decrease. I think that slide gives everything about the internal audit report.
Chintan, I'll just share with you where this idea came from. So if you remember, when years back there was this channel where in cricket matches were held in Australia. If you remember, Channel 9, if I'm not wrong, and they used to give those crawling worms in terms of how was the earlier team when it came to at that point of time in terms of runs and wickets with those balls when it comes to, and we all used to enjoy looking at those analysis and those graphs besides obviously watching the cricket. So that is where, as a human psychology, we are more attuned to looking at visual items and, something which is we are able to absorb based on our own meaning rather than other person's interpretation. So that is where I think this visual impact is something which is very important. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think, and you also talk about one thing, use of emoji. So I think the small thing just make it very interesting.
Yeah. There is one more element to the whole thing which I have not covered is the use of technology. There are softwares which are available like Tableau, Visio. There are also a lot of tools which are available for data analysis, which can be used to increase your overall coverage, and that can help you prove your point or make your point little more strongly. Yeah.
Great. Milan, we will take a couple of questions. I think there's just a minute. Okay, I think somebody's asking about a full-fledged internal audit report. I think you're going to share the template, right? So template will be shared. Yes. So there are many questions who are asking about the templates, and I think
so templates I've given it in bits and pieces everywhere. Beyond a point, this is something which belongs to my firm, now not necessarily to me, but there is a lot of literature which is available. So I think the heart of the report is what I've already given. Baki pura report bana ke nahi de sakunga.
Exactly, I understand. I think the focus is that at least they can get idea about how reports to be constructed, and everybody is customized. But your just a template of what to be included is more than enough.
I'll try to give that.
One question is that what is the course of action for internal auditors for some issues which are very sensitive and major non-compliance in nature, and management don't want same to be reported in ACM?
Yeah. So this is a very important point and a very sensitive point. And see, you if the management is asking you not to report something, first you need to understand why is the management asking you not to report something. Okay. Whether it is what is the is there a malified intention behind it? Then obviously that's something which you cannot deal with it. Is this a recurring issue? Is it a one-time issue? How critical it is? So if they have already said it's a critical issue, right? So if it is a critical issue, I don't think you have an option not to report it. Your responsibility is to the audit committee. And if you do not report it, you will be held negligent at a later stage. So at the most, what you can do is you can present the management side of it along with your observation. So let's say some FEMA non-compliance has happened, example, and FEMA is one of these stringent laws where you did not take certain approvals which you had to take. Now, there is no option but for you to report it. But you can give a balanced view in terms of corrective action which the management has taken, or the opinion which the management has taken, or you can provide any other solution which you feel is relevant for doing with it. Now, let's say if you really get into a problem with the CFO and the managing director on that, I mean, then you will have to look at whether you can continue with that client or not. Because as a professional, like you have attest functions where you can sign something and not sign something, here also you have something where you may be able to let go once if it is not something which is very significant. But if it is significant, you may have no choice but to report it.
Right. Yeah, another question is from Chetan Bhai again. Is it a good idea to issue flash report for issuance of final report?
Yeah. So flash report is in 3 instances where there is a loss which is happening to the company on a daily basis, and you want to curtail those losses, in which case there is no option but to issue a flash report. Or you think there is a fraud which is happening, or you are suspecting very strongly, there are strong indicators that something is wrong, in which case you will have to issue a flash report so that further damage can be stopped. It also depends on how long are you from issuing the final report. If you are anyway going to issue it in 1 or 2 days, then there is no point in creating another document. But if it is going to take another 8, 10, 12 days, it might as well make sense to, that flash report could also be an email. Again, flash report is your communication to those charged with governance that this is something which I want to draw your attention to. Yeah.
Yeah. Another question is from Ritik Malhotra. What can be the strategy if a data is not available in ERP and Audit is not giving the manual data? How we can get the data?
It's a scope limitation.
Yeah.
How you will get it? You can't enter into a fight. You can go to his senior and say, "Okay, bhai, you are paying me internal audit fees. Are you going to pay me internal audit fees for doing the work, or just saying that this is something which I have not done?" So sometimes you have to convince it differently. And this is what we have done at various cases, with the process owners or head of the department, where we have told the top management that you're wasting your fees in internal audit because you're not utilizing it. And why are you wasting that fees? Instead, you give us the data, we will give you some or the other solution. We will give you something which will be beneficial. So sometimes you have to use that reverse psychology to explain the person that, "Arey, you should stop your internal audit because you're not making good use out of it."
Right. Ravindra Khare has asked question: how to balance expectations of process owners and audit committee in an observation? If you can elaborate.
Yeah. So as I said, both of them are looking at it in a differently. The process owner is looking at what was the process gap, why did that process gap happen, what he should do so it does not reoccur, and whether he can improvise the process or not. Correct. The audit committee is looking at it from a risk perspective. It is looking at it from a culture perspective of the organization. It is looking in terms of the monitoring of the policies and procedures and action being taken if things are deviated. So both the objectives are different. So your observation, either you can create 2 different documents, one which will meet to the process owner, and your executive summary can highlight something which is useful to the audit committee.
Okay. Rajesh Sharma has asked question: how to consider reporting of observations that are confidential in nature?
Okay. So if they're confidential in nature, I understand that would be a non-compliance with a law or something which is done wrong by some of the employees. Then there is a guidance in the IIA as well as SIA on these subjects, and these are similar to our attest functions. When you identify that there is a fraud, what is it that you do as a statutory auditor? I think you have to follow similar steps. You will have to go to the senior most level or go to the audit committee, explain them that this is what has happened. If you do not want to put it in writing because you feel that will get jeopardized, then you may have to explain it at the audit committee and take some assurance that this will get rectified over a period of time.
Great.
Again, there is no straight answer to some of these ethical questions. I'm not here on the ethical board, nor I'm going to, nor am I. But I mean, all of us looking at the gravity will have to be, the practices which we follow cannot lead to wrongdoings.
Right. I think we are also expecting a practical view from you only.
Yeah.
Ashutosh Kalamkarji asking that if you have some good books in market, if you are aware about that on internal audit.
Yeah. So there is book by Sawyers, which is considered as a Bible, SAWYER, Internal Audit by Sawyers. That is there. I would encourage him to look at the internal audit website and also become a member of the Institute of Internal Auditor. There is a lot of literature, partly available free and partly which is paid to the members. There is a journal which also they come out with. Besides that, there are articles in BCA journal on frauds or things like that. I think Deepji Singhal is one of the authors to a lot of those articles on BCAJ. There is Chetan Dalal who writes on investigation. There is a book by Chetan Dalal also on forensic audit. So try to look at it. You are not going to do forensic when you do internal audit, but the same principles can be applied in a milder version when you're doing internal audit.
Right, exactly. Rajesh Sharma has asked question whether the continuous monitoring reporting could also follow the same layout and reporting as you provided, or it can be different.
People are using software, my dear. People are using tracking softwares. There is a company called Laser. There are other governance. They call it governance software. They call it. There is some terminology which they use for it, some jargon which they use for it, which I don't remember. But there are a lot of softwares which are available which track these things. Yeah. So if you do a search on it, you will get the answer.
Sure.
Laser is one which I remember. Yeah.
Which is Laser?
Laser, LASER.
Okay. Manish Bansali has asked question. I have come across certain observations which management is of the view that they are necessary to run the business, or sometimes the unorganized sector in which company operates requires such action. Would it be wise to put such points in the draft report or to discuss separately with ACM?
Again, so let's say if it is a fictitious purchase voucher or fictitious bill for expenses. Now, what answer will you give? Do you need to, if the quantum is large and the explanation which is provided does not seem sufficient, or if the approvals are not in place, then you cannot, hide it. If there are sufficient explanation provided, if you feel that they have been properly approved and they were business exigency, you will have to say that these are expenses incurred with business exigencies and present it, and then let the board and the ACM discuss within themselves, and you can observe.
Yes. We will take last question and then we'll move to the next session.
Sure.
The last question from Chetan Bhai Thakkar. How would you deal the situation where the final report is issued for management comments? However, management does not give any action plans for prolonged time. What do you suggest for a closure of final report in such a situation?
So you'll have to do a hard closure like you do open purchase orders for which material is not received. You'll have to compulsorily close it. You will have to have it as a part of internal audit charter and your engagement that if you do not receive responses within 3 months, there needs to be an SOP even for internal audit, right? That the internal audit report will be given within 7 days, responses will be received. After 7 days, the revised report, within 5 days, revised report will be issued. So there needs to be that time frame, which is a part of the internal audit charter or internal audit document, which should be there in place. So you will compulsorily have to close it at the end of 3 months, generate an UDI, say that responses are not received, and present it in the next meeting as the first observation for the next year's audit.
Great, Milan Bhai. I think a wonderful explanation of every practical questions which has been thrown upon you. And one of the most important thing and the purpose of driving you here has been really achieved.
Thank you.
The reporting, which has been one of the most important thing, which SMC are generally ignoring. And I have seen that you're covered wonderfully. Many important points, templates, everything has been addressed appropriately. So thank you so much. And I request CA Parag Bhatt, who is the coordinator of this event, to offer heartiest word of thanks to you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. I guess I will be in a lacking of words to thank you, and I am honored to have an opportunity to give a vote of thanks to Mody sir. Sir, it was indeed a great session, and the way you delivered the knowledge was extraordinary. And I must say, the PPT designing and the content was truly creative and excellent. We can see the hard work put behind for material and content. And I particularly like the way you have started with the wrap up activities and ended with the creativity reporting, because generally reporting becomes the boring. Nobody that is not, it does not have any effectiveness. But when you are, the way you have shown that you can use the emojis or like the presentation, graphical presentation, that will definitely make it effective. So it was definitely an excellent presentation. Everybody is saying the presentation and the content was truly magical,
Thank you.
and the quotes used by you was truly inspiring. It will definitely help us to improve our knowledge and working style. Once again, I would like to thank you for such an extraordinary and fruitful session. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Parag. Thank you for those kind words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milan bhai. Now we are moving towards the next session, and we are fortunate to have the very good personalities and the name of the professions along with us. I would like to invite CA Nilesh bhai Vikamsey, the past president of ICAI, CA Shailesh bhai Haribhakti, CA Rakesh Agarwal, and CA Sandhya Sriram from Wipro as a part of panel discussion.
Can you see me, Chintan, and can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you. Just a minute, Nilesh. Yes, I now we can see you.
Okay, thank you.
Shailesh bhai, yeah, he's there. Yes, now we can see.
Shailesh bhai, good evening. You're on mute, Shailesh bhai. You'll have to unmute yourself. I think there's a challenge. Shailesh bhai is not able to unmute. Will you tell the somebody from
sure.
the host to unmute him?
Yeah.
Now I've got it.
Yeah, now it's okay.
This is technology, Shailesh bhai. You can unmute somebody.
Yeah, that's
Like in the
whole
Rajya
thing.
Sabha ruckus going on.
No, but more importantly, I need a past president to unmute me.
These are the beauties of
CA Sandhya, are you
technology.
there? CA Sandhya Sriram, are you there? Can you please? I think Sandhya is not there.
I think there are 500 participants.
Sir,
And
you
just go to
all
S
are
and see
waiting
whether
to listen to you.
seeing that.
We can start the discussion, and meanwhile, once she joins, I will add her to also discussion. Right. So, good evening, all of you, and welcome to the
Shailesh bhai,
last day. Welcome to the last
see
day
her
of
alphabetically. I can't see her.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. And yes, Sandhya is there. Just a minute. Okay, fine. Good evening, all of you, and welcoming the dignitaries of the particular from professions. And I'm sure that even though it's the last session of the conference, this is going to be one of the biggest and best session for the whole conference. Let me briefly introduce the faculty, and then I will hand over charge to the panel moderator. All these dignitaries doesn't require any introduction. They all have been very well known, and everybody knows him. To start with, the past president of ICAI, CA Nilesh Vikamsey. He is a partner of Kimchi Kuberji and Company LLP in practice, which is in practice since 1936. He's a member of ICAI, is DISA qualified, business consultancy studies course of BCAS he has done. He's a member of special purpose group for preparing ICAI stakeholders, expert advisory committee, many various committees he has given his deliberation. If I just go on, he has in the past he has served as a part of IFAC, and I have personally observed and witnessed his commitment to ICAI, because when he was president of ICAI, I was a chairman of ICAI the branch, and the level of commitment I have seen, sir, salute to you. Amazing work you have done, and in your tenure, ICAI has taken the new heights. Coming to the Shailesh Haribhakti, he has been, when I just look at his profile, sir, truly believing I have learned a lot of things by just reading your profile. A man who has worn many hats in the corporate world and raised the standards of various organizations so high that the people consider him as a serial innovator, pioneer, teacher, speaker, author, analyst, entrepreneur, and citizen of the world. He is not only a chartered and cost accountant, certified internal auditor, certified financial planner, fraud examiner, but also a board chairman, audit committee chairperson, independent director, and of some of the country's most preeminent organizations. He's a global thought leader in the area of environment, social, and governance, and has helped pioneer impactful concepts like IR and innovating path to net zero. He's also a well-known thought leader on the Indian economy and public policies. Uh, I think there are many things to be seen from him, learn from him. Welcome you, sir, to this particular panel discussion. Coming to the next panelist, C. Rakesh Agarwal. I think at least at Ahmedabad and Western region, he doesn't require introductions. I have personally called him maybe more than 5 or 10 times to ICAI Ahmedabad branch and auditing accounting conference. He is heading the audit operations and risk at Reliance Industries Limited. The company, along with subsidiaries, are engaged in various businesses, including refining, petrochemicals, telecom, retail, and treasury. Rakesh ensures quality of corporate sustainability reporting and RIS integrated in annual report. He has previously worked for PwC, leading various engagement involving multi-gap reporting for clients such as Glaxo, HLL, VSNL, Vodafone, MRPL, GSW, SBI, Johnson & Johnson. He has given several opinions and has been accomplished a trainer for senior and middle management. Rakesh bhai, welcoming you to this panel discussion. And we do have along with us Sandhya. We are not able to see her video, but she is there. She is the global head of audit, risk, and ombuds for Wipro Enterprise. Before this, she was with Wipro Limited as a global head of finance for consumer business unit. Prior to joining Wipro, Sandhya worked close to a decade and a half with Unilever in various roles, including business partnering, controllership, shared services, IT, project management, supply chain finance, etc. She was placed in India's top 100 women in finance by AWM. She has been awarded the CA CFO twice and CA Professional Achiever once by ICAI. Sandhya was placed in the top 50 young leaders in India out of 27,000 plus participants by Economic Times in 2011. Welcoming you, Sandhya, to this particular August gathering. I think, Sandhya, are you there? Are you able to speak? Sandhya, can you please unmute yourself or start the video? Shailesh, I think I am not waiting much more time because everybody is eager to listen to you. Meanwhile, Sandhya, I will talk with her and then I will ensure that she is able to start her video. Sure. I request Shailesh to please take charge. Everybody is eagerly waiting to listen from all of you.
Well, thank you very much, Chintan. I am indeed extremely happy to coordinate such an outstanding panel. Wonderful to see Sandhya. Welcome, Sandhya. We can now see you. Hopefully, we can hear you once you unmute yourself. Lovely. Good.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, Rakesh, would you also please turn on your video? So, and we have an absolutely outstanding panel this evening, and the subject is extraordinarily interesting and relevant to our times. And I would break down the subject into its three components. One is the role of the accounting profession, of which one of our panelists has been the past president, Nilesh. We all have great and deep respect for everything that you have done for the profession. And we are looking forward to hearing from you the perspective of the Institute in terms of how are we going to modernize and come and make our profession future ready. because to me, that is really the challenge of today. And to my mind, the future includes a host of information technology deployment ideas, machine learning, artificial intelligence, analytics, IoT, making sure that almost every process that we can think of is digitalized. In addition, the world has taken off virtually in the last 1.5 years in terms of its need to report on 6 capitals of integrated reporting and adopt frameworks for sustainability reporting, about which Rakesh will enlighten us from his perch as Reliance's implementer. And I think that's a fantastic perspective that we can look forward to today. And then we have Sandhya, who you've heard her biodata. She's been one of the most outstanding chartered accountants, and we are all very proud of your achievement, Sandhya. I'm particularly proud because my daughter now works for Hindustan Lever, and so I have a particular affinity for the company because some of my very dear friends are also from Hindustan Lever. But with your perch at Wipro, you can tell us how you are making Wipro future ready, and thereby making sure that all the modern ideas and issues that we have seen come alive in the real world. It's a very challenging world. It's a fascinating world. Over the last 250 years, post the Industrial Revolution, the way we have plundered our planet can put anybody to shame, particularly puts me to shame. And therefore, I think it is high time that we all commit and pledge to making our world a better place to live in by drawing down our carbon footprint by whatever means all of us can actually find. And I'm so happy that the accounting profession has been put in the center of this battle by the proposed establishment of the Sustainability Standards Board under the International Accounting Standards Board. We already have the Value Reporting Foundation, which has emerged at the merger of the GRI and the SASB, giving us a global framework possibility, which will communicate to all economic interests. So together with the standard setting body and the framework setter, we have, for the first time, a grave responsibility cast upon all of us in the accounting profession to make sure that we can report our actions strategically, make them understood by everybody who is reading the financial statements. And so this panel will focus on these global issues. But let me begin by requesting Rakesh to talk us through Reliance's phenomenal journey. Rakesh, I'll only preface your reply by saying that at a board meeting where Mukesh Bhai had asked all the boards of the group companies to come together in Jamnagar, we had asked him the question, what is the single most important area that you believe will require deep focus? And without a moment's hesitation, he had said sustainability. So over to you, Rakesh, to guide us through how you are going to make the BRSR and beyond that. I mean, you all have gone way past it. I've seen your integrated report. I've seen your sustainability report. You've gone way beyond it, but please walk us through it.
Thank you to the host as well as the co-panelists, including the chairman of the session. Sir, I would like to just put a caveat. Whatever I say, it is in the individual capacity of the person who is well-versed, who knows this subject. and may or may not be the views of Reliance Industries. But let me take a step back. Today, we have reached a point in sustainability, individual corporates, individual jurisdiction, and United Nations, where we all can visualize that there is a need to segregate the mass from the mass of data to very small actionable points which materially impact the larger world. Example, what is this mass of data that we need to distinguish, and what is the core thing that we need to attack globally? Because sustainability is borderless subject. It is not tied up to any single profession, and I'll cover that in my conversation. If we look at the way it started, earlier there was one framework, which is GRI, Global Reporting Initiatives, and there used to be 120 parameters, and people used to report those 120 parameters. It covered HR related, like succession planning. It covered emissions related, like carbon footprint, SOx, NOx, TPM, and a lot more. It covered manufacturing excellence. It covered supply chain excellence. It covered governance framework, a lot more. You name a business function or a business unit of any conglomerate, it covers that. But these 120 parameters did not have any meaning for all practical purposes when viewed in complete set. Then there came a lot of frameworks, some 7-8 frameworks like Natural Capital Protocol, NVG guidelines. Now the refined version in India is BRSR, Social Capital Protocol, the SASB, which is rule-based standards in United States, and they have some listing of 2,000 disclosure plus disclosure requirements and a lot more. So once we look at from the lens of literature, it is vast to comprehend. So let me simplify a more actionable understanding what sustainability means and what is the impact we can measure. Whatever get measured, get performed, get formed part of the governance process. And also the key stakeholders can, including the societal expectations around that, can have a continuous feedback loop to make it happen. So if I have to put it to a 4th standard boy in a school, I'll say broadly sustainability is reflecting 5 parameters. A, cleaner air for the world, abundant and clean water for the world, natural soil for the world, the way we conduct our business, the entire societal eco-balance we maintain in terms of taking care of those who are vulnerable in the process, be it land grabbing or third-party processes. And finally, whatever is the global focus, whatever we do has consequential impact, but whatever has reached to the red line, that needs to be curtailed, and there can be a balancing offset somewhere else, which may harm some other ecosystem, but that is still within the limit. And within these 5 things, if I have to say one thing which is important for each of these, first, when it comes to air, although the technical measurements include CO2, SOx, NOx, TPM, for all practical purposes, there is only one thing that needs to be considered, which is emissions of CO2. And why? As we speak today, the world has some 47, world is emitting annually some 47 gigatons of CO2. And the upper limit for the planet to absorb CO2 is 800 gigatons. We have already emitted some 500 gigatons since inception. Additionally, 300 gigatons if emitted, there's then global warming and the other chain reaction happens. So this has to be stopped at an alarming pace. And as we speak, we contribute 2% to the global emission, 2% to the GDP of the world, but 6% of the total emission. So we'll be always under the hot spot to control it out, like any other jurisdiction. When we talk about the second part, which is water, and for this emission is solvable in India, there are a lot of things which can happen as an assertive action, including carbon sink. Example, India is having 21% forest cover, but the land allocated is around 32% for the forest. If extra 10% of the allocated area using drones and another technology is just converted into a live forest, it becomes a natural sink to absorb and offset the entire 4 gigatons that we emit today, 2 and 2.3 gigatons that we emit today. So for all practical purposes, there are solutions which are industry-less, jurisdiction-less, which everybody can self-balance. The second part that we come across sustainability is fresh water withdrawal. The net discharge to the society should be net zero. And that is what we need to pursue. When it comes to the third aspect, which can be measured effectively, is zero landfill and zero contamination to the soil. So cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner soil is the bulk part of it in terms of sustainability. Coming to the governance, the way we work, none of us need to work in a manner which exploits the vulnerable. And there are leading examples in countries across the other border, maybe a emerging superpower. Example, generating race to bottom with respect to employees, that employees are asked to reverse bid as to how much lower salary they can do. So Foxconn globally, Apple said that, oh, I will not do business with you because you have gone for reverse race to bottom, which harms their own ecosystem. Earlier, an employee was staying in a room. Now he's staying 8 people in a room just to decrease his own salary, which is not a healthy practice to the world. So is the case with respect to supply chains. Now, if I have to look at what needs to be measured, there is a lot of global alignment. And in India, the alignment is already done between Niti Aayog and United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, where 4 or 5 things have been picked up and given nomenclature like Skill India, Digital India, so on. And these, once converged with an assertive action, is practically a real path towards sustainability. Now the question is what we can do as individually as a corporate. Whatever is expected today, if we do not adopt, society will force us to accept. And if we are late in accepting those things of the society, perhaps we are not in the first quartile of our manufacturing and other capabilities, and sooner or later we become redundant. Now, a company, which is say a steel company or an oil company, and there is an assertive action around it. Say in case of a steel company, for 1 ton of production, you emit around 1.8 to 2.4 tons of emission. For an oil company, you emit 0.25 tons of emissions for the amount that you refine. So what happens is sooner or later, as a societal license to operate, when we set up plants, those are set up for 20-25 years. But the kind of targets and the regulation that is flowing in, that in next 3 to 5 years, perhaps everything will get emerged in terms of showstopper. So unless we are ahead in this journey for self-course correction, and if we do not contribute to the society positively, society will make us to contribute positively. And if we don't align to the societal expectations, sooner or later, we are on the path of value destruction and not value creator, and we are not there relevant in the larger ecosystem. So that way, there are few corporates who have gone ahead and announced the plans of net zero by so and so thing. And I'm proud that our chairman has also done that.
Thank you, Rakesh. That was so exhilarating. You just simply condensed it into 3 clean messages: air, water, and soil to be clean, and that which we can continue to use. You brought out the brilliant criteria of social license to operate. To my mind, that clarifies almost everything. The framework and standards you adopt can vary, can change, can move around based on individual requirements. And your emphasis on net zero was really fantastic. I would like to leave this great audience that we have today with one recommendation. Read the book called Drawdown, which talks about how can we as a world reduce 1,000 gigatons of the carbon that we have emitted. There's a little bit of discrepancy between Rakesh's numbers and my numbers. My numbers have it that 2,400 gigatons of carbon have already been emitted. And we are already on a path of self-destruction. What drawdown tells us is how do you bring it down to 1,000 tons of reduction. And the G20, as we all know, have agreed to keep the incremental temperature to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But this has been a most fascinating discussion so far. I would like Nilesh, as Nilesh pointed out in our preparation, that after somebody has responded to a particular question, if other panelists want to add value to it, that would be a very good way to go. So Nilesh, over to you to add value to what Rakesh has already told us.
Thanks, Shailesh bhai. And first of all, congratulations to the Ahmedabad branch and especially Chintan for thinking on this 4-day, fantastic schedule of program. And in fact, I told Chintan Shailesh should not be a moderator. He should be a panelist with the amount of knowledge he has. But then Chintan told me that Shailesh wants to be a moderator of this session. So I had to sort of accept that humbly, if I can say so. So thanks, Shailesh bhai, Rakesh, Sandhya. It's great. See, I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm speaking in Ahmedabad, and all of us, we Gujaratis are, I would say, more business-like. So I will just convert this. Sustainability in typical Shailesh, you're also Gujarati, so and I can only share my experience. We are connected to the largest cement company of our country, which is, of course, on the path of sustainability. They have been top end as far as reducing the pollution, etc. But currently, they were able to raise very, very cheap funds. Today, all across the world, there's a huge pool of investment, which is, earmarked for ESG, this thing. So if I'm, I'm a chartered accountant, I'm business-like, and what is it for my clients or for my company where I'm employed or for my, where I'm an advisor. So I would say if you go on walk this path, one is, of course, we'll do very good, and that's the right thing. But to incentivize it, I think you've got very, very good quality funds available, cheap funds, which will sort of be an incentive for you, commercially also, apart from the very, very laudable objective. But Shailesh said that we have destroyed our past generations, and we also have been responsible for destroying a lot of things, which I think our future generations may have to bear with us. But the commercial, benefits also are huge, good funds available. So please focus on that. I'm not an expert on sustainability the way Shailesh and, Rakesh are, but yeah, there is a lot of cheap funds available to go on, walk this path. That is the only thing I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilesh. Sandhya, do you have anything to add to this wonderful discussion on sustainability, accounting, and standards?
First of all, I'm really grateful for being here in this elite panel. And, for me, if I take a step back, I think once I received my award from Nilesh sir, and it's such a pride moment. I still have that photo, hanged in my house. And then last time I was coordinating for the Institute of Internal Auditors, and it was such a proud moment for me that I was able to bring Mr. Haribhakti as a speaker. And then to be on a panel, it's like I can't ask for more. So I'm really grateful for having given me this opportunity. Coming back on sustainability, I think just taking off from where Mr. Vikamsey had said that there is a lot of money. In fact, there was one statistics which said that there is $2.96 trillion of money that is in ESG funds. But being an audit and a risk person, I want to take a little contrarian view on this, or a little other side of the coin view. I think somewhere on sustainability, because there is so much of money chasing, of so much of people. In fact, there are people who don't want to join companies which do not have an ESG ranking or a rating. So there is a lot of focus. But I would want to question whether in all of this focus, are we able to retain the integrity and quality of the sustainability reporting that we are doing? And some examples maybe. So, for example, I think let's take some of the social networking companies, and from a sustainability point of view, they're really on top because their carbon footprint is low, and they have very healthy practices, corporate governance. But look at the other side of it. Some of these social media actually have algorithms that run that, for example, promote hate speech. Now, how would I rate that when I look at a sustainability agenda for the company? Let's take, say, a cola company. Now, all of them have fantastic corporate governance. They always give back to the society. Many of them are water neutral, etc. But say the cost of diabetes in just US alone is $300 billion. So somewhere I feel that when we look at sustainability and we measure sustainability and funds chase sustainability, we as, say, auditors or audit professionals or people that are signing some of those data that is getting published should have that qualitative mirror. I know it's a very difficult line to tread because there are multiple business models, and each business model comes with its plus and minus. But that qualitative aspect and how companies are looking to neutralize some of the quality. The another aspect of sustainability is like quality of leadership, diversity, number of women that are present. It's not just a Companies Act requirement that you need to have women directors on the board, but really, isn't that an ESG parameter? It comes in social. So how well are we able to bring a qualitative dimension to sustainability as audit leaders is the only question or a food for thought I would like to leave the audience with.
Fantastic, Sandhya. I think what you are pointing out to is two things. One is that ethics is going to be the future of all purposeful governance. And that's how we are integrating it into corporate India. We are looking at how do we bring ethics and weave that into purposeful governance. And that's, it's a journey, and the other thing that you pointed out, which I was very impressed by, is that all of us are in this together. None of us are left out, whether it is diversity, equity, inclusion, carbon footprint, purposeful governance, culture, values. We are all in this together. And so that's a very key thing that I would leave behind. And Chintan, I'm going to give you a thought that you may want to propagate through the rest of your term. And that is the concept of gross zero. So what you need to look at is not just wanting to get to net zero, as Rakesh pointed out earlier, but before committing a single rupee of capital expenditure, consider whether that is going to be causing any carbon footprint whatsoever. Today, technology has emerged and has converged to such an extent that you simply don't necessarily need to add to the carbon footprint. And what was announced by the chairman of Reliance, which Rakesh pointed out, I think is something that we need to all focus on, which is enabling the hydrogen-based economy to actually take shape. This was also part of our budget this year. And I think gross zero cannot happen without hydrogen, clean hydrogen. But so we'll leave the subject of sustainability there and move on to another equally fascinating subject. And I'll turn to Sandhya to answer the question on artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, and how do you bring all of this to bear on auditing? Will we have robo auditors, robo accountants, blockchain accounting, which will automatically move from a banker to a constituent? What is the future that you are creating at a modern thinking company like Wipro in all of these dimensions?
Thank you. Robotics auditing, it sounds a little fancy, but it really is what's happened in the space of transactional finance. We have seen that the starting point was that finance moved into shared capabilities. A lot of transactions started getting automated. And so there was higher order intelligent activities that humans were performing. And slowly the machine started learning some of the higher order intelligent activities. And therefore you have, many bots which do, for example, say a simple BRS. Now, earlier someone had to do a matching of the BRS, but now the system knows that what are the exceptions, how do you match? It learns from you, and therefore then it creates that capability. So similarly, in the space of audit, I think given that in the base transaction system, a lot of technology has penetrated, therefore it is lending itself for audit to be able to deploy technology for creating value. So I want to maybe look at a few examples. Now, payment duplicates. Now, many tools are available which now have fuzzy logics. So earlier, maybe I will do the system would probably do a duplicate check if the invoice number matches. But now there is capability that looks at maybe the first 3 digits of the invoice number, maybe it looks at the text that is written. So there are various logics that can be built into the auditing solution itself so that it throws out exceptions. So what it does do is it helps us manage volumes of capability. So I still believe that everything is at the center of human intelligence and machine capability. So the intelligence always comes from human. So artificial intelligence, the intelligence is still the human that gives it that intelligence. So how we define the system to learn and come up with logics. Another example is this entire space of natural language processing, computers being able to read documents. I think that's gone. Some of the benefits of that in audit is phenomenal. I don't have to now sit and read, say, 200 contracts if I'm auditing a sales process. Rather, I run it through the tool and I tell the tool that if you pick these 20 types of exceptions, please flag it to me. But still, I have to ask it saying these 20 type of exceptions, please flag it to me. So I think the way the machine is enabling, it's becoming an extension of what we can think, and it's going to give us the ability to cover volume, ability to cover breadth, and ability to give action. So the world of sampling is gone. Very few auditors now look at samples and take assertions. You can do 100% in much lesser time than what you were looking at with samples in the past. So there is a big development that has happened because of machines becoming more and more capable. Now, the other aspect is that, for example, in one of the conferences, I think the CFO of IBM was saying that they have a tool that scrolls the across and it picks up keywords which are relevant for the business. And every day morning, he gets a report saying, for your business, this has happened in Afghanistan, this has happened in, say, Germany, and all of these are of consequence to you. So in terms of our own extended capability to decision making, I think the tools of in our, for example, in Wipro, we do social media sensing. So we are a FMCG company, we are into manufacturing. We look at what customers are speaking about us across in social media. Then there is a tool that tells us saying, these are the kind of comments that customers are speaking. This is what's happening with your products. It then gives me both as a leadership team to be able to react quickly to the market, but also as an audit team to see what trends are coming. So for example, if a customer flags saying, my product is not returned, but my money was, my product was returned, but my money never came back. It's a control issue for me. And if I'm able to pick it from some customer, say in Malaysia, and the system is able to translate and give it to me, then I know what I need to go and check. Is my payment control strong? Is there some fraud happening there? So the extent that AI or ML or these tools are able to give me, I think like that Robo movie, it gives me like 100 hands to shoot at.
Fantastic. Sandhya, that was absolutely scintillating, the way that you wove everything together. I picked out 3 new thoughts and ideas from what you said. No, it's not artificial intelligence that we are really talking about. We are talking about augmented intelligence.
Exactly.
How can you, as an auditor, augment the intelligence and the capability to judge that you have, which modern technology enables, and therefore very critical for every firm in India to embrace and bring into their working this augmentation of their intelligence through what is called artificial intelligence. Let us, as a chartered accountant's profession, let's call it augmented intelligence. The second thing that I picked out is that you are focusing on insight, not on audit findings. And this is very critical. I keep telling people that the way technology has evolved, all your routines are going to be taken care of. All that we want as an audit committee, for example, I need to see is what is the insight. And therefore, you need to switch to what I like to call management audit and behavioral audit, as opposed to simply the financial audit. Because the insight that you can get by reordering the way you perform all these processes can lead to better delivery of management performance and behavioral performance by the employees, which cause the largest risk. And the final thing I picked out from your wonderful talk was on online reputation management. Today, if you don't, whatever is your reputation is on the internet. And if you're not tracking your online reputation and you don't have an audit process which does that, you're simply going to miss it. And that could be the biggest miss of your enterprise, that you don't know what people are thinking and talking about you. So that's a very key leave home, don't leave home without it, if you like, insight for auditors and companies to take away. But that leads me to a question I need to address to Nilesh. Risk. Nilesh, how are you seeing risk being handled, both from a auditor perspective, a preparer perspective, and most importantly, from an audit committee perspective? And how do you, as a person who is both an auditor and a director, how do you look at risk in a differentiated way?
Shailesh, very important point I think you've raised today. I think if at all the focus of the boards, which is there, it's absolutely on risk. And I think as all of us know, recently SEBI also has mandated, earlier I think it was the top 500 listed companies where they needed a risk management committee. Now it is going down to top 1,000 or maybe all the listed companies. But irrespective of the fact that it's mandated or not, I think the focus on risk has gone up across entities. Now, first, let me speak as a director. As a director, yes, whether it is the operating risk, the pandemic was the biggest, I would say, the test of the risk. I would say we all talk of business continuity, we talk of disaster recovery and all. I think the real test of, I would say, risk and the risk mitigation was this pandemic which we faced last time, and which completely, brought into focus that anything can happen. At a personal level, as humans, I think we saw risk very close by through this COVID. As corporates, the business being impacted, completely shut down, the whole risk, and sudden, completely out of the blue, something comes up and you are, shut down. Yeah. So that was, the corporates, absolutely there's a focus on risk now, whether it is technology risk, that's becoming more and more challenging, whether it's cyber security, the attacks, the phishing attacks, the hacking, so on and so forth. So technology, business, operations, and different, parameters. And of course, the reputation risk, what Sandhya mentioned, social media and all, that also is a huge, focus. Coming to the profession, Shailesh, let me tell you that today, thanks to the focus of the regulators and the way, and not only in India, I'm saying across the world, I think risk has become the most important, facet as far as audit and assurance practice is concerned. And I'm seeing a tremendous change. I'll just go back a little bit in the back, when few years back rotation happened, I think all of us as a professional, we sort of literally barged in, please pardon, I mean, within our own friends, I would not, shy from saying undercutting each other and trying to get the topmost, listed company audits, etc., where the rotation was happening. Within a year or two, what I observed is, I think most of the large firms saw that the earlier predecessor, whichever firm it may be, had a certain level of risk appetite which was accepting, which was not acceptable to the incumbent firm which came in. And you saw a spate of resignations. So that is what has happened at that point of time. Just recently, about a year or two back, we saw the audit quality review, orders of which came out with NFRA. And the way they are interpreting the standards of auditing, the way they're interpreting the code of ethics, the way they're interpreting, and they're not even accepting the international interpretation. Forget the the domestic interest of the ICAI or the MCA or whatever, but they are not even accepting the international interpretation. So suddenly the risk, I would say, has gone up substantially in the assurance practice. And very lately, let me, since I'm speaking again to my colleagues in Ahmedabad and Baroda, I've heard of late is certain of the large firms have stopped doing certification work. I would say other than what is mandatory to be done by the statutory auditor, because they are perceiving huge risk in that. And I'm saying rightly so. I think the way we have been, selling ourselves cheap, and again to my own brothers here, the sardiyon to kya thappa lagane ka kaam hai. I would say, please reassess. I'm giving you what is happening at the top level, and time is not far away where the regulatory focus is going to be there at the mid level. And thanks to technology, I think all this will be, the focus will not remain only on the large firms or the large entities. The focus will be on the mid-size and the small entities also. So the sooner we get our act together from a risk parameter, how much are you accommodating? How much risk are you accepting of a client from a professional perspective? Please assess that. And lastly, let me tell you, please do a risk analysis of your clients also. Wherever you feel there is a problem of your own reputation risk being impacted, forget that. Even a wrong name. I'll just give an example, Mr. Vijay. No disrespect to Mr. Malya and the entities which he had. I know the auditors of those companies are facing the amount of regulatory focus, and despite not doing anything wrong. Kingfisher Airlines was one of the most qualified accounts when Mr. Malya was running it. I'm saying one of the mid-sized firms of Bangalore was doing it. Despite being heavily qualified, going concern, today they are being harassed because their name is attached to that particular group or the entity. And despite having a reasonably good job, I'm not saying a perfect job or an imperfect job, I'm saying a reasonably good job. So please focus on risk, whether you're a director, whether you're a professional as a chartered accountant, as your audit or assurance client. And it's not only restricted to audit and assurance. If you feel there is less risk in income tax, please be careful. I heard about a year or two back, one of the mid-sized firms in Mumbai has got a huge claim from one of the foreign company clients because the local entity, they didn't file the return in time, there were huge losses, and they got a claim. So if we are under the impression that income tax doesn't carry a risk, I think though in India, the litigation against the CA firms is minimal as of now, but time is not far away with all the class action suits being prescribed in the Companies Act and all. And so be careful. Even in GST, there is huge risk. The way we are seeing the names of chartered has been tossed around in the media. I don't know what has been the involvement, etc. That will be subject to investigation. So risk is across the profession. Please don't consider that our profession is completely risk-free, especially whether it is mid companies or small companies. Risk is across. Please be careful and keep the names of good companies with you. In that also, there are chances of some accidents happening, but at least to the best extent possible, have good names to be associated with. That's the suggestion I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilesh. So my question to you would be, who would audit the more risky corporations, which constitute a bulk of the companies in this country? But we'll leave that for another day. But the points you made are phenomenal, that risk is elevated, it's all pervasive, it walks into your door from the outside, and therefore it's better that you manage it. Each one of us can have different levels of risk tolerance. So we will make kind of assessment of our risk tolerance limit. And I like that concept when I'm looking at it from an audit committee perspective, as to what is your defined level of risk that you wish to take in your company. And that, to my mind, is extremely trackable, very important to track, and make sure that your risk guardrails are set in a way that you're taking risks that you can tolerate. And your risk-taking ability arises because of your capital, because of the insurance that you're carrying, because of the processes and practices and the people and all the other things that you have invested in, enables you to track and mitigate that risk. And so while there is this prevention, I also often say that the other side of the coin of risk is opportunity. Because if you can mitigate risk in a way that leaves people free to innovate, then you will see opportunities being seized and innovation being practiced. But Rakesh, if you have any other additional thoughts,
Shailesh,
please.
just one,
Yes.
since I'm addressing chartered accountants, friends, I mentioned there are a lot of risks as far as the practice is concerned. But just for your information, those who don't have professional indemnity insurance, the ICAI is tied up with New India Assurance and almost 80% discount to the card rate. Roughly about 20-25% is the cost, and very insignificant cost. Please get the professional indemnity policy of the ICAI tie up with New India
Thank
Assurance.
you.
At least it'll give some peace of mind, to whatever
So
extent
nice.
you want.
Then you can
depending on the levels
extend
of
your
practice.
risk-taking ability.
Sorry, for, Rakesh,
Okay.
your
No, but very valuable, Nilesh. Thanks for that. Rakesh?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll start with the statement which we have started believing of late, and especially with the concept which gets aligned with the networking effect. If upside risks are not availed, it becomes a downside risk. I repeat, if upside risks are not availed, it becomes a downside risk because somebody else will enter, he will get up to scale, and in healthy competition, you are out. Yeah. So the question is, what is the risk in terms of understanding or not understanding the mega trend? And then we'll link it to the profession. Practically, there are 4 categories of mega trend, which gives an upside risk. A, physical mega trend, like nanotechnology. Say, for example, today there is a material called graphene, which is 200 times stronger than steel. The inputs are available in abundance. So what happens, instead of making a car which has a dead weight of 1000 kg, and it can carry additional passenger load of 700 kg, with just 5 kg of graphene, you can have the same category of total load. Sooner or later, it will disrupt the longer plants which are already set up. So the question is, who optimizes the right bet at the right time? So let's put a bucket, physical disruption. The second bucket, let's put it in the nature of, say, digital disruption. And I'll just put 2 categories. A, which is already spoken in terms of AI, I'll say global intelligence. Let's take the case of Professor Roberto, who is building a platform. Apology for the word that I'm going to use, but that is the name that he has designated, lyingbastards.com. What he's doing, he is on a mission that they will track 2 billion live prices across the world.
Wow.
At any point of time. So whether a country discloses inflation data, a banker discloses a projected inflation rate, India produces a GST total number, a company produces its sales number, purchases number, all these numbers can be digged out or mined out, or at least corroborated, be it at a company level or a jurisdiction level or at a global citizen level, including, say, a pollution level in a particular locality and the number of hours the plant operates. So there is a nexus and AI can be built around. So if we talk about a company, whether it be purchase, whether it be sale, whether it be production, whether it be emissions, perhaps everything can be supplemented, not with internal AI ML, but global intelligence. And that becomes a thing which gets connected to the broader world. I'll say intelligence as a service in times to come. The second thing that is happening is eliminating the persons who are in the position of trust, claiming to be in the position of trust, but no longer trustworthy. There is a declining faith in global governance. So with blockchain, I'll not use the word cryptocurrency, I'll use the word blockchain digital entitlements. So what happens is, if I look at BSE 30 companies, physically focused companies are 7, 8, banking and financials related companies are 9 out of BSE 30. These get disrupted. So there is an upside risk to tide on the mega trend or get disrupted and out. Third, I I'll say a lot of things that are happening in terms of biological disruption, like plant-based protein or fuels. And it will disrupt the food industries and consumptions, including energy like anything. And the fourth is societal disruption, which relates to ESG. Additionally, financial inclusion and diversity across generation, across gender, across gender. And all this, when taken care in the right spirit in terms of mega trend, then it is an upside risk which we all can avail. And if we fail to identify, it becomes a downside risk. Now, the biggest thing that we are looking at is the shrinking business models. Shrinking length of a company to remain at the top, which was earlier 90 years, reduced to 40 years, and now an average company remains in top set for 12, 13 years. So the question is, as a chartered accountant, what tools I have to gauge it? So I'll strongly suggest two things. As far as understanding disruption is concerned, I'll say MIT review. And when it comes to understanding business models, I'll say value chain analysis by Kaplan, followed by basics of Michael Porter, 5 forces analysis. A combination of these two, that is technological disruption and understanding of mind, that is management model, strategy to execution. Strategy part, Michael Porter, 5 forces. It's a complete book on its own. And then value chain analysis in terms of how you strengthen those mind with your various arms and legs, I'll say by Kaplan. And this gives a directional foundational understanding. The way for audits and controls your COSO framework, it gives a parallel understanding of mind. That is the corporate minds. This understanding, when linked to the risk management, gives us to whom we need to associate and whom we not need to associate. So Brilliant. In the new world, the fundamental thinking of all thinking, I would like to mention, because the business models are shrinking, one of the fundamental things as a finance is the net debt should be zero. We are coming out of the years of leverage from cheap funding to cheaper equity investments across the world, and that we always see in startups. And this mega trend should be a tailwind rather than headwind. So I'll strongly suggest net debt zero, understanding of disruption, and our own understanding of concepts to identify the upside risk, which if not addressed becomes the downside risk. Thank you.
Superb. Rakesh, that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, tremendous takeaways, and gives a comprehensive perspective. Let me add a Gujarati twist to this. There is a company which operates out of Gujarat, which has hired 40 PhDs and does counterparty risk management support. So what it has done is, using trawling and machine learning and artificial intelligence and analytics, it has created red flags of 72 varieties on the entire population of 18.5 lakh companies in this country. All of them, top to bottom. This is all done in Ahmedabad. So what you should do is invest on a SaaS basis. If you are about to take up a client, or if you have a bunch of clients and you want to do risk analysis, just test them out for the output, how many red flags each of your client has. Sastu, Saras, and Upyogi. Tranechi. Sorry for going into Gujarati, but it is really worthy to look at. And this is the kind of thing that Rakesh is talking about at an extremely high level, but it is available now at an absolute bare bones. At Blue Star Limited, for example, we do not do a single credit decision without knowing the red flags of a counterparty. We simply don't do it. And that is what keeps us at negative working capital and at net debt zero to be the goal. You need not achieve it instantaneously, but there should be a path to net debt zero. I fully endorse everything Rakesh said. I'll just point you to one convergence that I'm very fond of. And that's the convergence of information technology, nanotechnology, and biotechnology. For the first time in the history of our planet, we are able to look at things at a cellular, at an atomic level, as opposed to looking at it at any grosser level. So today, every human being's genome can be mapped. And there's a company headed by an Indian called Viome.com in California, which has perfected this art. So it will map your genome and give you prescriptions of what you should eat and what nutrients you should take and what supplements you should be having every day. Because they are able to map it at a cellular level, at your genomic level. And a whole lot of new companies are coming out with this kind of orientation, going down to that atomic level. So think about the singularity getting achieved when these technologies converge. And read Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near. It's just changed the infrastructure of my thinking. And so I recommend it to all 500 of you who are on this call. So Sandhya, what would you like to additionally comment about this rich discussion on risk and on any other subject that you feel, because we have taken this discussion to a level that even I could not have imagined, but thanks to the great panel we have.
Yes, after what Nilesh and Rakesh have said, I really don't know how much more I can add to this extremely rich content. But there is just one part I wanted to mention, is that what is often underrated in any risk management framework is the culture and the ethics that sit behind the risk management. And I think there is no better example than Enron. Everyone picks that example. But there was a survey about a year. Apparently, Enron had very strong policies on corporate governance, at least documented. So someone did a survey at that time to actually ask them, do you really think they follow all of it? Nobody said no, but nobody said yes. So
it's so much in the heart. It's not all mind.
Yes. So I think many times in risk management, the form and the substance is important. And if we get overly caught with the form, we lose the substance, we lose the underlying ethics and the underlying value systems that have to drive our risk philosophy.
Great reminder at every time. To my mind, the next inflection point of governance is going to be ethics. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yes.
So,
Shailesh, just one, just I observed in one of the companies where I'm a director, depending on, it's an NBFC, and the way they have sort of calibrated the model. For example, few years back, the gold loan business was a negative from a Reserve Bank perspective. So the scaling down the model, and so I think that agility of the entrepreneurs also, depending on what is higher risk, and to recalibrate the model, I think is very important. Just
absolutely right. I've had a chance to scroll through the chat, and there are many interesting questions in the chat box. So I'll just throw out a few. One is, how relevant is the bottom of the pyramid and the considerations that we should have with the small shareholder in all these discussions that we are conducting on auditing and risk and sustainability and all of that. I throw that question open to anybody who wishes to talk about it. Sandhya, go ahead. You seem to be enthusiastic about answering that question.
I'm always enthusiastic. But so I somehow believe that the concept of accountability to shareholder is starting to get more and more myopic. The accountability is to the stakeholders, which is a much larger pool set of we are accountable to employees, we are accountable to environment, we are accountable to society, and as much as we are accountable to the shareholders. Now, but specifically when it comes to small or large shareholders, if the company's practices are when we, especially in Indian context, where there is a lot of significant ownership which is concentrated around large shareholders, and therefore the decisions and investments are influenced by the will of the large shareholders. I think there are just two parameters. One is that that is an element of risk that companies take, and everybody wants the company to progress. So therefore, there is a effective risk management and there is an independence in governance that should act as a counter check for the health of the company, not necessarily just for the shareholders, the minority shareholders. So the governance layer has to counter that without scuttling the entrepreneurial drive or the entrepreneurial element that come with it. And the second is that there has to be significant accountability to every wrong yes, and there has to be significant credit to every right no.
Very good. Very well said. Thank you. Rakesh, how do you see it from the focus I know Reliance has on not just getting it right 99% of the time, and get more concerned about that 1% which is missed, because that's what hurts the small man?
Sir, I'll put it this way. And this is for corporating as a whole, rather than any particular company, where the focus and the world is having its own thoughts around that. Where the focus of the decision maker and the people who are running the company is not quarter to quarter term, but business cycle to business cycle tuck. And there is a tremendous history, will, and courage to adopt the societal transformation. Then anybody who is a shareholder of just 10 share at the beginning or 1,000 share at the beginning, he may consider himself as minority, but in fact, he is part of the entrepreneurial spirit for long. Now, alternatively, if you have a shareholder in the name of minority, whose business is making lots of inquiries, buying a share, selling it in 3 months, make appropriate inquiries, and get out of it. So there is a big difference that needs to be taken into account as to what minority shareholder means. However, if I have to use the larger word, stakeholders, and in corporates, you have a continuous feedback loop from all the stakeholders, including those who have a voice and those who do not have a voice, like the work carried out by the foundations, rich foundations, be it in the field of sports, be in the field of food meal, be it any direction, any part of the society. But if there is a continuous feedback loop that we are listening, then perhaps it takes care of all the stakeholders, including minority shareholders.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So here's another question from the chat box, which maybe
Shailesh,
Nilesh,
can I just chip in
Sure.
on the earlier
Sure,
just to add?
please, very important.
I think slightly from a small shareholder large, I think there's a lot of subjectivity involved. And I don't think there's a right solution to the whole thing. I'll just give a case in point in the sense, how we saw in between, say maybe 8-10 years back, the largest steel company of our country acquired a multinational company. The largest aluminum company acquired a large aluminum company. So there were a lot of negative press around it. But I would say, and possibly some of the smaller shareholders, sort of objected why the capital is being deployed, this, that, etc. And but if you look at the cycle now, the way the cycles have changed, the metal cycle and all, I think they must be laughing their way to the bank. If I can say. So there could be, I say for the small shareholder, he's got a, he can always walk out of the company in the sense if he feels something is not appropriate, a decision. I think the larger share, I'm not taking a view for or against, but what I'm trying to say, the decisions are subjective. Hindsight will make everybody wiser. If I can say the use of hindsight This
Very
had to be
true.
done or that had to be done. But at that point of time, whether something was done, I would say not only for the company, for the group, but for the country, where you're positioning India into an international, I would say, arena and acquiring these large setups. Till that time, hardly anything of those sort we had heard of, the larger acquisitions. So, or the JLR acquisition. I think there will be subjectivity. The largest shareholder has got larger stakes involved. The smaller shareholder can easily walk out and get into some other investment if you want. I'm saying. So I think it has to be balanced. It cannot be one right or wrong is the only.
Very true. What both of you are saying is that there are two sides of every coin, and one has to take a judicious view. But here's another very interesting question from the chat box. They're of course quoting Ashwath Damodaran, but the question is on greenwashing in the sustainability concept. And what Ruchir talked about very recently in a very good editorial page article called Greenflation, saying that while you're trying to do all this great for the planet and you're trying to install renewable energy and doing an energy transition, have you considered the cost of actually bringing those devices into existence and whether they cause an inflation? Because there is a complete shortage of the commodity which is required to make solar panels. That was the example that he quoted. So this whole idea of greenwashing and greenflation, what are the thoughts of this panel on these two controversial or two sides of the sustainability coin idea? Rakesh, will you like to go first on,
Yes.
greenwashing and greenflation?
I'll put it, leaders are leaders because they deliver more than what is expected out of them.
Perfect.
And India is country of great leaders, including you take a BSc 30 company and you find great leaders around. You take a profession and you find that the profession is matured and it is not a mere aggregator, but it is matured and people, including the office bearers, are working on honorary basis for life, and eventually few of them become president of institute. Now, I would like to use the word branding versus what things you are executing, purposeful execution. So when a reporting goes into the hands of persons who are creating brand, there is greenwashing. Example, Volkswagen case. When a reporting goes into the hands, when organization merely report what they have done, then there is nothing called greenflation. For example, there are corporates in India who has eventually always from last 10, 15 years contributed more than 2% of their net profit to CSR 2 schemes later. So there is nothing called social, ESG, greenwashing, so on and so forth. They did it because they believed it. So if we are in the hands, working with an ecosystem in the hands of right leaders, right organization, the concept of greenwashing practically does not apply. And this is what I generally see across India Inc. Now, a smell test is, if a company which is dealing in IT, they talk about lower emissions and not about e-waste, then there is something, then I have a problem with them.
So true.
So for all practical purposes, if I have to put at the second aspect, that was the interesting thing, the only boundary for adoption is cost and resources involved. The question is not cost and resources. The question is when we are going to adopt. And here I'll give certain statistics. I'll give you an example which Google has committed to the world, that they will reduce emission positively. It's not net zero. They'll enable saving of carbon emissions by 1 gigaton. 1 gigaton is perhaps, for all practical purposes, 40% of India emissions. And what they are saying that whatever I'm doing, and there are two aspects of thought leadership. A, whatever computing power I'm using, I'll factor in the cost of green power rather than race to bottom kind of stuff. And because my business model is so robust, I can afford that. And because my consumer likes it, an element of marketing 3.0. 3.0 stands for emotional appeal, is also there, supported by consumer. I'll inculcate it as part of my business model. That's part A of consumption, inside. Part B, outside, I'll produce analytics for various municipalities and cities across the world, which will enable them to be much more efficient. And indirectly, I'll save the carbon emission of 1 gigaton, which is at least as good as 40% of Indian emissions. So that was one part, factoring into the business model. The second is when there has to be mass adoption. Then what? When we talk about mass adoption, there has to be societal behavioral change, and I'll give you a few statistics. The cost per unit of power was 300 rupees for when it is derived from solar. It is now 2.4. Tomorrow it can be 10 paise. Planet Earth is blessed with sunlight. Every 55 minutes, we get so much of sunlight on the planet, which can feed the entire electricity of the world for the entire year. It's only an exponential development of technology. The second development that is happening across the world, which is kept confidential, but those pilot runs, and it is more than MPV, it is more than the VC funding stage, that you just buy something of a size of half kg and it runs your entire house for 5-6 years. So those innovations which are happening to solve the global problems of the world will throw out new sources of energy, including plants, that will replace the traditional understanding of energy, which was coal. Coal is getting out, new sources are getting in. So I'll not use the word greenwashing. I'll use the word towards a greener coal, which is supported by leaders, the society, the jurisdiction, and global citizens like you.
Absolutely brilliant answer. Should we talk a little bit about greenflation? Sandhya, do you have any perspectives on greenflation?
Yes. So just before that, I wanted to just little bit reflect on this greenwashing, and I think we picked it up a little earlier. That then leads to the greenflation, is that this all boils down to how we look at the matrices and how money is channelized behind the matrices. So one of the reasons why we see greenflation or greenwashing is because the way some of these funds are measured and the way the matrices are set it's set based on, so it's a good concept that it's a virtuous circle, that I invest behind a company which is sustainable, and therefore that is a more profitable company. I give it a lower cost of funding, it grows, and therefore the virtuous circle works. But in the interest of the virtuous circle, I think there is somewhere a point to think that have we lost the true spirit of the matrices? And are we asking ourselves whether it is greenwashing, greenflation? Are we asking ourselves whether the right matrices is what capital is chasing? And some of the returns are going to be more long term. And if these are going to be managed by fund managers who have been set short-term goals and short-term incentives and short-term growth targets, I think we will never break that cycle of being able to do something sustainable.
Absolutely. I hold exactly the same perspective. I think we need to get out of our own self-imposed limitations. And I love the way Rakesh put it in terms of just stretching yourself to get to where the world needs you to be. That is so crucial, because we may not have a planet, we may not have a life if we don't address the issues which are facing us. And it's not about just accounting or standards or frameworks. It's about actually doing the action and making sure that you save yourself. Would you not save your family? Would you not save yourself? Would you not want to breathe the clean air that you breathed when the whole world was shut down? Or drink the clean water that you can get in a gentle stream which has not been polluted by chemicals which are discharged from a factory? I mean, These are the questions that really should be keeping us awake. But I would like to bring things to a bit of a close, or at least approach towards our closing time, which is 7:30, by asking each one of you, beginning with Nilesh, to give us 2 leave behinds for this wonderful audience. Nilesh?
Thank you, Shailesh bhai. Of course, a wonderful moderation which you did, and a lot of topics. I think the theme was internal audit, but I think we have sort of broad-based the whole theme. And I would say from an now going back to the core, from an internal audit perspective, the core for which the whole 3-4 days of sessions were there. And my belief would be it's a absolutely important role. I have been seeing substantial benefits, number one, as a director, apart from where we render the service internal auditors. And I think the internal audit profession is evolving. And even in the when we say as far as the companies are concerned, the internal audit profession and the way the value add is happening to the corporates, and whether it is risk mitigation, risk, the focus. And I would just want to say we need to, of course, keep on changing, harnessing. How do we harness technology? And my focus would be on harnessing technology for better deliverable, and on the whole way forward as far as the internal audit profession is concerned, and even for the audit profession. And just to give you one background from an ICAI perspective, when I was the president, Shailesh, we for the first time started a digital accounting and assurance standards board. Just to how do we marry technology with accounting and assurance? So that was the whole objective, and I think good job is going on in that committee right from that time, and it is just being built upon. I think we're the first institute to focus on this particular area, and I'm sure as the successive chairman, presidents, I think they are going to be focusing, and they will equip our members, to harness technology for delivering, whether it's audit or internal audit.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Fabulous, Nilesh. Thank you, Rakesh.
Yeah, I would like to give 2 messages: one domain and one transformation. People believe in general that I do this 100-hour course, 500-hour course, I know the subject, I have the certification. To get into any profession, earlier, 50 years, 60 years back, graduation was a great thing. When we did our CA, it was a profession that you can take it to generations. Now, people are taking it that there is something more to be done for getting into the shoes as top management. So whenever we uplift ourselves, a typical rule in layman's sense is a 10,000-hour rule. Whenever we are getting into any new subject, which typically 3,000 to 4,000 will be in terms of domain, balance, leveraging our past experience to get into new experiences and patterns. So unless we are on that journey, any kind of upliftment, I'll say, become more in the nature of compliance kind of role, or low-end BPO kind of work, or KPO kind of work, but not in terms of leadership. So having said that, then the question is, what next? So I will say, consider investing time into 2 categories, and those 2 categories with a mindset. Being an internal audit conference, let's put a word: total assurance landscape.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Total assurance
Great
landscape
concept.
can be from strategy and governance, as I has that. If I say 90% of the management time and the employment that goes is into marketing excellence, supply chain excellence, strategic pointers, I'll say procurement related sustained advantages, technologies of the future, then there are certain support functions, which can be, I'll say even treasury is the main function. Support functions like direct tax, indirect tax, audits, costing, many things. So those are, I'll say, a dot in the ocean. So unless we get into a mindset of the top, and then we are able to provide not a control only from an IFC perspective, but total assurance landscape, that is something that can be a USP of us. So what we need to do? What we need to do, A, harness our understanding, without using the word of Ivy Leagues, anywhere where you can get an insights into emerging strategies and business model and devote a journey of 10,000 hours around that. Second, I'll not use the word digital disruption, it's quite low. And as Sir Shailesh Haribhakti mentioned, convergence of technologies, I'll say it's more than 10 elements, and digital is one element, which was the phase of third industrial revolution. Now we are entering into fourth industrial revolution, where digital has already been used. This understanding of emerging technologies of fourth industrial revolution as part of strategy and business model will make us a much, much, much better professional in times to come. So a rule of 10,000 hours is first message. And the second message is what? Strategy and emerging technologies, and a dot journey along rising from the ranks of an officer to a manager, to a leader, to a senior leader is something that I wish that all of you who has done this kind of hard work by passing chartered accountancy, we can be a much better global citizen compared to other professionals on this planet, where you can get an accountancy degree in 3 months.
Yeah.
All the best for that.
Well spoken, Rakesh. Sandhya, your message to the young generation.
So Wayne Eckerson in 2010 actually coined this concept called purple people. And ICAI also has referred it in one of its papers. Purple people are people that are at the intersection of technology and business skills. Being a core technologist or being a core business person is no longer going to take us, what got us here, I think what got us here, our business skills, is not going to take us there, if I have to quote Malcolm Gladwell. So really, our future is at the intersection of technology and business skills. We have to apply the core of our accountancy course, the knowledge that we gain from the roles we perform, the value that we create. We have to learn and adapt to new technologies. I think Rakesh had beautifully looked at what mega trends and how technology is going to disrupt. So it's not just about being able to say use an advanced AI tool. It's about being able to look at technology mega trends. It's being able to leverage technology to business, and that's what is the future. That's where we should all walk, and that's that would be my
Fabulous. Terrific. I'll just say two things because we've just got 2 minutes left. One, that internal audit, internal control, and statutory audit and all kinds of auditing are converging into a total comfort-giving environment to enable risk and innovation to be enhanced. I always believe in enhancing your risk to get the additional advantage. And I believe in innovation to get to the next levels. You should disrupt before you get disrupted. Very critical. And two, I feel we should together create society 4.0. We have all been talking about the Industrial Revolution, the Anthropocene era, which we must halt. And we must move to the next era of a world that we would love to pass on to our children and our grandchildren. Thank you, Chintan. Thank you, the fantastic professional brethren of Ahmedabad and Baroda, for giving us this opportunity to share some thoughts and to leave behind a few messages that all of you can take away. Back to you, Chintan, for closing the session. I finished at 7:30.
Sir, wonderful deliberation. I think it's really one of the best things which will happen as stalwart of the profession are here. It's really always difficult to get even one person. When all four together sharing the thoughts, I was just thinking that I am part of the one global conference and where the best and best of speakers are speaking and sharing their values. Amazing. I think from internal audit to ESG and risk and a lot of things we have covered, and this was really a wonderful experience. I request CA Jakin Shah, the coordinator of this particular session, to provide word of thanks. Jakin, please unmute yourself. Okay, maybe there is some issue technical. Meanwhile, I would like to give, it's my pleasure to give a personal word of thanks. Whenever I call, I think it was really a pleasure. As Sandhya referred earlier, she was the coordinator earlier to call Haribhakti sir for this particular conference. And for me, when I call everyone, when somebody calls you, they are under pressure, because they feel that calling some dignitaries like Shailesh bhai, Nilesh bhai, and Rakesh bhai, it's really difficult because they may be very busy, whether they will be available, not available, diary, calendar. But I think one thing common for all of you, on the same phone call, you all have said yes. Without, for ICAI, whenever something is there, you all say yes for ICAI. So big salute to all of you. ICAI is
Chintan,
having.
you
Yes, sir,
understand our position, Shailesh as moderator and we as panelists. That was much more tougher. And on the lighter side. Sorry. Can
Exactly, because when I called Shailesh sir and I was offering him moderator, I know being panel moderator is little but much tougher, because when there are panelists are there and then taking them all together was difficult, but he has readily accepted, and he was the champion to see that the whole deliberations, being to the particular point of near to internal audit. And Nilesh bhai sir, I know you very well. You have been the stalwart on profession. Wherever something talk on professional approach, professional behavior, discipline, ethics, you are the first person to be known, and you have really given the insights on the risk internal audit perspective, and one of the very important advice about getting the professional indemnity insurance. I think we all must take care of that, sir. Shailesh bhai sir, I think for you, I will talk later on, because you are the chief, you are the master of your curator of this whole panel discussion, and the way you are taken up, because in every topic, whatever will be the topic, whether it's internal audit, whether it's ESG, you just name the topic and he has given a fantastic validation. Sir, thank you so much for your validation. Rakesh Agarwal, I have listened to him for so many years. I think around 10 to 12 years back also, when IFRS India was coming to picture, and he has been there. Ahmedabad loves him, because wherever his name is there, I think the participants is packed. And sir, again, the way you share your experience, the way you share about how can we talk about disruption, I think that a lot of things can be learned from you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable thought process here. And Sandhya, even though you have been youngest across all stalwart personality, but the way you share your experience, because being a part of this kind of panel is again a lot of pressure on your shoulder, but you have given your wonderful thought process for this, and so that I am thankful to each one of you. It's really pleasure, sir. I'm looking forward to invite you again and again to ICAI and the branch forum. Thank you once again to all of you, and my thanks to each participants for being there throughout the conference. I think for full 4 days, we have really got an excellent speaker, very good topics, and lastly, it ended with one of the best which can happen in ICAI profession. So thank you all of you. Thanks once again to each panelist and moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chintan.